Game of Thrones, The Wrath of the Sleeping Dragon. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 726, Fishing Hook. Bonero had been staring at the woman's face the whole time. He saw the tangle that flashed across her face and knew that this matter could not be forced. As a priest of the highest level, it was naturally his best ability to figure out people's hearts. He also knew that people like Asher had a stubborn temper, and if he was forced too much, it would probably backfire. In that case, there is another way. Bonero's voice was a little sharp, and his eyes seemed to be burning with flames, and the flames also wrapped around his lipless mouth. Mr. Messenger, you can stay in the temple and wait for him to come to the door himself. At that time, I will naturally take action to deal with him personally. Will this work? When Asher heard the words of the supreme priest, her brows frowned slightly and her cheeks were full of worry. She felt that, unless this monster was a fool, it would definitely not go into the temple of Valor. Isn't this looking for death? But Bonero seemed very calm, shook his head and spoke. If it doesn't come, you won't lose anything, and your uncle can recover here smoothly. And I think the other party's behavior seems a bit reckless. It should be that he has just been infected by the power of the evil god, and he is not completely corrupted. He doesn't know the height of the world yet. He dares to commit crimes in Volantis, which means he doesn't take me seriously. So it may not dare to break into the temple and continue to commit crimes. Bonero's words were very confident, even conceited. If this monster really came, Bonero would really have the confidence to deal with it. After all, he is the supreme priest of the Red God cult, and is also respected by believers as the fire of truth, light of wisdom, first servant of the King of Light, and a first-class high priest in the Red God cult. If he can't even deal with such a small thing, Bonero can't hold this position in the Red God cult with so many talents. This seems to be the best way at the moment. The slender woman with long legs bowed her head slightly and was silent for a while, but finally nodded and spoke. Thank you for the help of the supreme priest. You're welcome, Lord Messenger. However, Bonero's eyes were calm, and his bald head covered with flame tattoos reflected the sunlight above his head. It rained in Volantis last night, which was one of the reasons why Gillian escaped successfully. There was still last night's rain and dew on the branches and petals this morning, and the ground under his feet was a little muddy. The night is dark and dangerous everywhere. We are all fighting for light, Bonero said meaningfully, and then he nodded slightly to another red-robed priest beside him. Moki Luo, Supreme Priest. Standing next to Bonero was a 7-foot-tall red-robed monk with skin as black as asphalt. His round belly was shaped like a huge pebble, and his bone-white beard and hair, as tangled as lion hair, snaked out from his face. The flame pattern on his face was even more exaggerated than Bonero's. The tattoos of red flames covered his cheeks and forehead, and even looked a little hideous. However, he was humble and pious in front of Bonero. He was Bonero's most trusted right-hand man, one of the most powerful priests in the Red God cult, and also the envoy who would be sent to King's Landing in the future. Miss Asher Greyjoy. This way, please. The red-robed monk Makoro raised his hand and made an invitation gesture. Next, he would arrange a residence for Asher in the temple. Asher hesitated for a second when she saw the other party's scary appearance. The other party was not much better than the monster last night. It looked like it would open its mouth to eat people at any time, but she still nodded and said goodbye to the supreme priest and then left. Bonero stood there and watched Makoro and Asher go away. A ball of undetectable flame was burning deep in his eyes, which was why some people thought that Bonero's eyes were a little red. He looked at Asher's back, and he saw a trace of black mist entwined behind the woman. Then he turned his gaze to a flame burning next to the stone pillar of the temple. As long as he thought of it, Bonero could see the shadow of any related person in the flame. However, there was only one person who failed, and that was Viserys. Bonero could not see any clues of him from the flame. Maybe it was okay a few years ago. He had a premonition of the crisis sweeping the world, so he had also noticed this young man a long time ago. He could see the shadow of Viserys' growth at that time, but he didn't know when he could no longer see him. At first, he thought that the true god stopped him from doing so, but later he found that it seemed not to be the case. He wanted to predict anything related to Viserys, but there was no result, even through other people around him. This person seemed to be not from this world. Is the breath on her because she was targeted by the servants of the evil god? Or because she is someone close to Viserys? That night, the sky gradually darkened. During the day, the Archon of Atlantis ordered all the tiger cloaks to thoroughly investigate all the streets and alleys in the city, intending to find the monster. Because what happened last night was witnessed by too many people, it could not be covered up. The next day, the whole upper and lower city on both sides of the long bridge of Atlantis was abuzz with rumors. Many people described the half-man, half-fish monster with vivid emotions, claiming that it was very ferocious and killed dozens of people indiscriminately in one night. It lived in the underground system of Atlantis, and many people who disappeared in recent years entered its stomach. And some people claimed that this was a monster that escaped from the ruins of Illyria. Because the incident of the Sea of Smoke riot a few years ago was a hot topic, the spreading Sea of Smoke swallowed up an ancient waterway, including a large area of land. As a result, ships heading to Slavers Bay, Karth, Jade Sea and other places must now be forced to detour the summer islands, which has increased the cost of trade for no reason. Volantis is not far from the ruins of Illyria, so the monster that suddenly appeared in Volantis escaped from the Sea of Smoke. However, some of these rumors sound reliable, well-founded, and convincing, while others are a bit outrageous. Some people believe that it is a conspiracy of Malacha Meghanaya, the governor of the Tiger Party, who secretly cultivated these monsters through alchemists with the intention of ruling the world, because the ruling philosophy of the Tiger Party is to conquer the world. However, in fact, if the Tiger Party really has such ability, it would not have declined for hundreds of years. Chapter 727 Sacrifice. In fact, some of these speculations are close to the real answer. Gillian has indeed lived in Volantis for several years. He has lived here before he became a monster, and many of the people who have disappeared in the city in recent years have indeed been eaten by him, and he also escaped from the ruins of Illyria. To be precise, he brought the curse or some kind of virus there. During the day, the Tiger Cloak Army and the Holy Fire Hands guarding the Temple of R'hllor went out together to search the streets and alleys of the entire city of Volantis. Even the bridge holes and manholes were not spared, chasing Gillian's whereabouts. And the room where he once lived naturally did not escape. Although this place is considered a restricted area in the surrounding streets, people living nearby dare not approach it, claiming that anyone who approaches here will disappear. But the slave soldiers of Atlantis are naturally ignorant and fearless. They broke open the door of the shabby little house and entered to search. However, the search did find some clues. A cover of the house was movable. After opening the cover, they found that there was something else underneath. The soldiers of the Tiger Robe Army jumped down with torches in their hands. When they saw clearly, they vomited one after another. Because the situation below was too tragic, there were piles of bones piled up into a small mountain, and most of them were chewed half broken, and several skeletons were nailed to the wall. They were almost sure that this was the hiding place of the monster, but he did not return here after escaping last night, and no one knew where he fled. The governors of Atlantis, the old families living in the upper city, the wealthy merchants, etc., none of them wanted to live in the same city with such a monster. They were afraid that the other party would change its target and no longer attack the imperial envoys, but turn around and kill them, and suddenly bite their throats in their sleep one day. In fact, the enemy had been hunting in their city for many years, but because the identities of the dead were not important, they were all slaves, drunkards or thieves, so it did not attract widespread attention. It would not have been exposed until now, if it were not for this accident. They did not know that the monster's target was Asher, because the scene was chaotic yesterday. The monster was first discovered by the patrolling Tiger Cloak Army soldiers, and then 3 people were bitten to death during the pursuit, and then attacked Asher. Therefore, it seemed that Asher suffered an unexpected disaster, but was just unlucky and accidentally affected. If the high-level officials of Atlantis knew that the monster's target was Asher, they might have driven her away immediately, preferably as far away from the city as possible. But unfortunately, they did not know the truth, and the supreme priest of the Red God cult, who was the light of wisdom and fire of truth, was not on the same path as them. In the three-headed politics of Atlantis, some Archons want to make their party powerful, some Archons want absolute hegemony, and some want to be the Prince of Atlantis, just like the pirate governor of Mia, who is now the pirate prince. But Bonero is different. He wants something more noble. Therefore, he injured in this temple of Atlantis, constantly making plans on the continent of Essos, just to wait for the right time. The night is long and dangerous everywhere. Bonero finished reading a letter from Novus, and then a ball of fire burned in his palm, burning the letter completely. The fire illuminated his pale cheeks, the flame tattoos on his chin and bald head, and there was a letter from Koha on his desk. At night, it was quiet. Recently, due to the visit of the Imperial fleet, the Archons of Atlantis ordered a curfew at bat hour until the next morning. However, because of the attack last night, the whole city knew that there was a half a man, half fish monster that ate human flesh raw, right next to them. During the day, their lair was destroyed to prove this. Therefore, not long after the sun set below the sea level today, Atlantis became quiet. Pedestrians returned home early, and shops were closed and boarded. The streets were deserted, and most people were in a hurry. There is a big river in Atlantis that separates the upper and lower cities. It is the Roina River, the mother river of the Roina people. The Roina River has a fast flow and a very wide river surface. Otherwise, the long bridge in Atlantis would not have been so difficult to build, and it would not have been listed as one of the 9 man-made wonders by Longlegs Lomas. And it was in this Roina River, that merged into the summer sea, that a black shadow was hidden under the water, and kept rising and falling. He was Gian, who escaped, and lost his trace last night. At this moment, he was floating on the water, and poked his head out. At this moment, a large ship happened to pass by here downstream, but the light on the Roine River at night was very poor, and the people on the ship could not see a head poking out of the river. Gillian ignored the large ship, and turned his head to look into the distance. This was his last shelter. After escaping from Andalus, he returned all the way to his former home. He did not dare to return to the west, because he was afraid that his current appearance would scare his family. Therefore, he could only come to Atlantis, but he did not expect that his last home would be taken away by others. During the day, he had quietly landed, but hid aside for caution. Then he saw his house being searched, and then Gillian fled again, and hid in the water. I want to kill her. At this moment, Gillian's eyes were emitting scarlet light, and his mind was becoming more and more irrational. The world in front of him became a little dark red. He had a strong desire in his heart, which was to kill all living creatures, not just the woman who persecuted him, but everyone, all living things. Then offer their souls to a god who lives underground, the will of destruction. Gillian's mind was fuzzy, but for some reason it became particularly clear when he thought of this. He seemed to see the 14 fire peaks in the ruins of Illyria in front of him, which had now turned into 14 bottomless black holes emitting billowing black smoke. Gillian had tried his best to suppress himself for several years, but now he was completely stimulated and failed. He seemed to be completely transformed into the monster he had seen in the ruins of Illyria. His body undulating in the water could still see the axe that Victorian had chopped on his chest yesterday. However, the serious injury he suffered yesterday seemed to have healed today, leaving only a long scar and broken fish scales, but the wound had completely healed. Then Gillian's eyes turned completely scarlet, and he looked in the direction of the Temple of Ruller and let out a low roar. Then he dived into the water and disappeared without a trace. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 728, Civil War Decisive Battle. The Imperial fleet has been docked in Atlantis for a few days. Because of the monster attack, it seems that they need to stay in the Temple of Ruler for a few more days. One is to heal his uncle Victorian, and the other is to fish out the monster that can move freely underwater, as the High Priest said. Otherwise, it will be troublesome if the fleet is attacked again when it weighs anchor and sets sail for Narth Island. Asher lives in the Temple of Ruler, writes a letter to record the recent events, and then sends it to Pentus for the governor of Pentus to present to Viserys. Writing a letter before leaving each place is also a personal habit of Asha after going to sea. After all, Viserys talked to her before going to sea. Her trip is to expand the influence of the Empire and spread the influence of the Iron Throne to Volantis, the Summer Islands, even Slavers Bay, Junfei, Meereen, and even the more distant Karth. However, due to the riots in the Sea of Smoke, there are now many difficulties in communication between the East and the West. The fleet must bypass the deep sea, which eliminates many weak fleets, but also cuts off the communication between the East and the West. Sitting on the Iron Throne, Viserys has heard that the Dothraki who crossed the Skeleton Mountains to the east seemed to have encountered a head-on attack from a powerful eastern country, and were eventually forced to retreat. Viserys never concealed his curiosity about the East. He even mentioned to John Clinton that in the future, when everything is put down, he wants to ride Balerion from Westeros and fly to the Sunset Sea to the end of the world. He guessed that it might be the legendary Dawn Mountains, the Land of Shadows, the Saffron Strait, or the Alts continent. However, this is only Viserys' guess after all. Although the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, this world may not be a sphere, and it may be something even stranger. After all, this world has gods, magic, and it is not strange to have anything else. Before the matter was completely settled, Viserys could only temporarily suppress his curiosity and manage the huge empire he had built with his own hands, so as not to abandon it halfway and destroy the previous efforts. These things can only be achieved after the enemies from the Land of Eternal Winter are completely defeated, and the secrets in the ruins of Illyria are solved. However, now, the feather pen in the house made a rustling sound when rubbing against the paper, and the woman with short black hair and a high nose bridge was writing this letter. This may be the most imperfect part of Asha's face. She should have been a beauty, and her palms were rougher and stronger than those of ordinary women, but her smile could make up for it all. Lars, come here. On the other side, a final civil war of the Kingdom of the Three Daughters was breaking out on the narrow sea. The two sides lined up at both ends of the sea and land. On the ground, the Tirosh mercenary group lined up to face the coalition forces of Mir and Lies, as well as the cat group hired by the pirate prince. On the sea, the pirates under Saladin, who were experienced in fighting, became the main force of the coalition forces at sea. In addition, there were a large number of ships, provided by the Governor's Council of Lies, many of which were even warships temporarily converted from merchant ships. Now both sides have completely killed each other. In the war that lasted less than a month, both sides have invested tens of thousands of troops in total, and hundreds of warships are fighting near the disputed land and the Stepstone Islands. There are more than 100 warships sunk in the sea, and countless soldiers were killed and wounded. The Governor's Council of Lies did not intend to invest so much in this war. However, the Lord of Tiroshi did not know what medicine he had taken wrong. He seemed to want to destroy Lies and Mir in one fell swoop, and eat up the entire Kingdom of the Three Daughters in one bite. Therefore, the Governors of Lies could only grit their teeth and persevere. And now in the sky of this battlefield, an eagle that should not appear on the sea is soaring. Its sharp eyes overlooked the battle below. At the same time, the scene seen in the eagle's eyes was also cast into Viserys' eyes. The area where the Stepstones are located has actually reached the limit of Viserys' power. If it flies further east, the eagle may be out of Viserys' control and go a-flying directly. The influence of the old gods is only effective for the land of Westeros. Viserys actually anticipated this world-renowned war. In fact, he did not set his sights here at the beginning, but just gave it to Ramsay to let him play freely. However, he did not expect Ramsay's ability to sabotage was more prominent, and he made the area of the Kingdom of the Three Daughters a mess, and finally a civil war broke out. But in fact, Ramsay's methods are not complicated. He is good at using people's inner desires. In this respect, he is very similar to Littlefinger, and he uses the powerful influence of the Empire to support agents and deal with those who are unwilling to cooperate. Then this final battle finally broke out. The shouting and killing on the earth shook the sky, and the warships on the sea were roaring. Everyone, get the catapult ready. Fire. Boom boom boom. Huge rocks doused with kerosene, burning with blazing flames, dragged their long tails, and flew into the enemy fleet. The sea was full of shattered warships and soldiers struggling in the water. The pirate Prince Saladin personally commanded the naval battle. This war was the final battle between the two sides and could not afford to lose. The Governor of Lies and the Grand Lord of Toroshi also came to the battlefield in person, but they all huddled at the back of the battlefield. Kill. This war lasted for a whole day, and both sides killed each other. But in the end, the Toroshi army withdrew from the battle first. However, the coalition forces of Lies and Me were exhausted and had no strength to pursue, so they could only silently let the defeated army withdraw. Both sides withdrew from the battlefield, leaving behind billowing smoke and countless broken ship wreckage on the sea, and countless corpses on the ground battlefield. The coalition forces of Lies and Me won the final battle, successfully defeated Toroshi, and crushed the other side's ambition to unify the kingdom of the three daughters. On the other hand, victory in the war naturally requires celebration, especially the defeat of their number one enemy. The entire Lies camp fell into a sea of celebration. The governors of Lies, including Humphrey Hightower and Trigo Marlin, also gathered together. However, while toasting at the table, an accident suddenly occurred. Saladasa led a group of pirates and suddenly surrounded the place where all the governors of Lies were feasting. And the young governor Humphrey Hightower suddenly drew his sword and stood up. Chapter 729 Coup. The governors of Lies were celebrating the victory of the war with a toast, and they were all drunk. However, at this moment, a noisy sound suddenly came from outside, and everyone present shuddered and sobered up from the wine they had just drunk. Because the young and handsome blonde governor of Lies, who was also the number one hero of this war, suddenly stood up and drew the sword at his waist. Hey, kid, what do you want to do? Another white-haired governor of Lies stood up with trembling hands on the table and scolded him in an unceremonious tone. Although Humphrey Hightower was the number one hero of this war, he contacted the pirate prince of Me, Saladar-san, and personally commanded the battle. With the help of the Me people, the coalition forces of Lies and Me finally defeated the Toroshi Grand Lord and shattered his ambition to unify the kingdom of the three daughters. But although Humphrey Hightower had made such great contributions, in fact, the other governors of Lies did not think much of him. One reason was that he was too young, and the other was that the Hightower family had lost its foundation and was destroyed by the Iron Throne, so they fled to Lies to struggle for survival. If one day the Emperor of the Valyrian Empire asked the people of Lies to hand over Humphrey, I'm afraid they would not hesitate to tie him up and offer him up. Therefore, the other governors of Lies had bullied Humphrey in business before. After all, he was the youngest governor and had no backing behind him. However, the blonde young man who had always been forbearing and restrained did not choose to continue to forbear this time. Humphrey Hightower held a long sword and showed a sneer on his face. When marginal figures want to rise to power, someone in the core of power has to give up his position. This is a common thing, whether voluntarily or not. Although Humphrey Hightower is the new governor of Lies, his life in Lies is not very happy. The main reason is that the power between the governors is not equal. There are relatively strong governors and relatively weak governors. Unfortunately, as a foreigner, Humphrey was excluded a lot in the Governor's Council of Lies, and his brother-in-law Trigo Marlin could not help him. In fact, all the governors of Lies present knew all these things, so when they heard what the other party said, everyone understood it. So you colluded with that treacherous robber? Seeking the promotion of marginal figure like you? The white-haired governor of Lies held the table with his hands and said sarcastically, Humph, I have said that this kind of robber cannot be trusted. Another governor of Lies also spoke up. Without these pirates, we can't win this war. Hearing this, Trigo Marlin, the brother-in-law of Humphrey Hightower, shook his head and said with a smile on his face, at this moment, there was a lot of noise outside, and there were shouts of killing everywhere. Just now, a guard had come in to report that the pirate Saladar-san was besieging the Lies camp with his men. The wealthy governor, who was so fat that he had some difficulty sitting on the chair, looked harmless. Who would doubt this fat guy who had difficulty walking? And in fact, what Trig said was not wrong. Without these pirates, the Lies people could not win this war, and perhaps they would have been unified by the Toroshi kingdom. However, there were still other Lies governors who couldn't stand Trigo Marlin still smiling. You know, there is a war going on outside at this moment. Although these pirates may not be able to get in, there is also Humphrey Hightower, a kid who doesn't know the sky and the earth. As an insider, Treg, you can still laugh now? And someone else spoke uneasily. He always had a bad premonition. His eyes kept on Humphrey Hightower, who drew his sword, and Trigomolin, who had a weird smile on his face, but had not stood up yet. The relationship between them was hidden very deeply. No one knew that Trigomolin was Humphrey Hightower's brother-in-law. You know, we are all here now, if we are wiped out by that pirate. Because this decisive battle is crucial, everyone gathered in the rear to supervise the battle at the request of Trigomolin, and the Tirosh Lord also came to the battlefield. This is a war that neither side can lose. If Tirosh loses the war, it will lose the best opportunity to unify the Three Daughters Kingdom in hundreds of years, and it will be seriously injured and unable to recover because they have invested too much in this war and cannot afford to fail. And on the other side, Whis and the rebuilt Mirror even more so. They both have reasons not to lose. Mi was massacred by the Dothraki and had to be rebuilt on the ruins. The Tiroshi king had been planning for a long time, and the Lies people were not well prepared for the war and were inadequate to deal with it. They were in a hurry to fight. If the Lies and Mi coalition lost the war, they would be directly destroyed and unified by the Tiroshi. Therefore, the Lies governors gathered together. How could they have expected that there was a traitor around them? And the traitor teamed up with the pirate prince they looked down on from the bottom of their hearts and wanted to wipe out everyone present. After winning the war, your ambition is really exciting, kid. You want to be the king of Lies? But there is no way to rule Lies with a bandit and a declining foreign noble like you. The white-haired Lies governor waved his hand contemptuously after sarcasm. The noble Lies people are not Westeros people. They will not believe your tricks of lords and nobles. And your bandit friend has not attacked yet. Even if he can attack, you will probably die here first. However, Humphrey Hightower, who was ridiculed by the Lies governors, was not angry. The golden-haired young governor held a long sword in his hand, and the guards on his left and right also held their weapons nervously, but he himself seemed very calm, without any awareness of being surrounded. Yes, I would have died before Saladin attacked. Humphrey showed no fear and still sneered twice. But I will not be the king of Lies, and I don't want to be the king of Lies. Oh. On the other side, the elderly Lies governor was slightly stunned when he heard this. He didn't understand why Humphrey Hightower went to such great lengths and paid a huge price, even giving up the position of governor of Lies to collude with the great pirate Saladin. If it was not to become the king of Lies, then what was it for? Chapter 730 Prince Rhys. Because I'm the one who will be the Prince of Lies. At this time, Trigomolin, who was sitting next to the white-haired governor of Lies, suddenly spoke. Puff. At the same time, he suddenly pulled out the dagger from his waist and stabbed it directly into the chest of the governor. Then he pulled it out, and blood suddenly gushed out, staining the old man's beard and clothes red. What? This sudden change came too suddenly. Trigomolin suddenly drew his knife to kill people. The other 9 governors of Lies present did not react at all. They did not expect that in addition to this ungrateful wolf, there was actually another traitor, and they had never noticed the relationship between Humphrey Hightower and Trigomolin. The other governors of Lies were frightened by the sudden change, but Humphrey Hightower, who was surrounded by these governors' guards, did not daze. His swordsmanship was still good. After all, the Hightower family was also the most powerful family in Westeros, and most of their children were educated in both civil and military. Go to hell. The golden-haired young man seized the opportunity and suddenly stabbed the governor's guard in the chest with a sword. The tip of the sword pierced through the opponent's back, and blood flowed down, starting this civil war. Kill. Do it. Kill them. Humphrey Hightower roared angrily, and the guards of the Hightower family behind him also reacted, drawing their swords and attacking the governor's guards who surrounded them. On the other side, because Humphrey suddenly stood up and attracted a lot of hatred, the rest of the governor's guards broke away from their masters and surrounded the young governor Lies and his guards. These governors of Lies lacked the power of protection, and these governors were pampered on weekdays. Unlike the nobles in Westeros, they had not touched the sword for many years. Therefore, facing the guards of Trigomolin and the soldiers he bribed, it was simply a one-sided massacre. Kill. Instantly, shouts of killing rang out throughout the tent of Governor Lies. Several Governor Lies were killed on the spot without warning, and his guards did not know what to do in the melee. They could not hear the orders, and just fought blindly. My lord. My lord. At this time, a messenger ran in. The pirates and mercenaries outside were attacking very fiercely. The commander in charge of commanding the Lies army requested support, but the messenger did not expect that he would see such a tragic scene. When he opened the tent, Humphrey Hightower chopped left and right with a bloody long sword, and Trigomarlin also had a mysterious swordsman beside him. He was wearing a black cloak and using a rapier that was very common in Bravos. His figure was erratic. His sword flashed and pierced the throats or hearts of the governor's guards one after another. Few people could survive 2 rounds in front of him. His sword was fast and fierce, and the corpses that fell beside him were the most. Trigomarlin was a man who cherished his life. He didn't want to give up his life for his ambition, especially since he still had a lot of money that he hadn't spent. And there was Humphrey Hightower's sister, the soft, smiling woman, his favorite concubine. He had no doubt that, if he died here, Linnes would remarry someone else without stopping, and would not shed a tear. Humphrey would also be happy to marry his beautiful sister to another noble in exchange for more political resources. Therefore, he made full preparations for this action, and hired this top swordsman to escort him. It is said that he was the former chief swordsman of Bravos, so he paid a lot of money, and the former chief swordsman of Bravos was indeed worthy of his price. You get what you pay for. He killed people very quickly and almost didn't put his customers in any danger. Puff, in a flash, all the governor's guards in the tent were killed. The hired swordsman pulled his sword out of the heart of the last guard, and blood gushed out of the small wound like a fountain. Mercy, mercy. Governor Lies, who survived the fierce battle, was almost scared to pee his pants. Seeing that all the guards had been killed, he could only kneel on the ground and kowtow for mercy. The conspiracy and betrayal on the free trade city side are often more naked. Unlike Westeros, which has a strong culture of nobles and lords, even if the enemy family is captured, they will only ask for a ransom, and generally will not hurt their lives. However, people on the trade city side are more inclined to cut the grass and root out the roots. I'm willing to support you to be the Prince of Lies, Lord Trigomarlin. One of them kept kowtowing and said. Trigomarlin looked at his former colleagues kneeling on the ground. His eyes flickered slightly, and then turned his head to look at his brother-in-law. Humphrey Hightower had just experienced a great battle, holding a bloodstained sword and still panting. He saw his brother-in-law's eyes and nodded slightly. It was easy to kill all the Lies governors, but Trigomarlin needed their help to secure his position as Prince of Lies, so it was obviously more useful to leave a few alive as hostages. At this time, because they had not received support for a long time, the pirates and mercenaries outside finally broke in. Trigomarlin and his brother-in-law looked at each other again, and then the fat Lies governor wiped the blood off his hands and walked out. Now that all the Lies governors were dead or captured, the morale of the entire Lies army was at a loss, so they could only obey Governor Trigomarlin. The big pirate Saladin, who led people in from outside, saw Trigomarlin and Humphrey Hightower coming out, and laughed. I knew you could succeed, my friend. Saladin had reached an agreement with Humphrey Hightower and Trigomarlin long ago. They helped Saladin prevent Lies from sending troops to attack me, and Saladin helped them capture Lies. And the two had to form an offensive and defensive alliance, helping each other. Lies recognized Mir's actual rule, and Mir also recognized Trig as the governor of Lies. Therefore, they dug a trap long ago, and trapped all the rulers of the Kingdom of the Three Daughters. They almost got something for nothing, and took away the control of the two trading city-states. The person who acted as a matchmaker for them was the spy of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the Empire. They used the visit of the Imperial fleet as an excuse, claiming that the Empire was ready to expand its influence in the Eastern continent, and lured their family to join. Chapter 731, The Third Daughter Kingdom Surrenders. The civil war in the Kingdom of the Three Daughters is over. Viserys looked at the intelligence in his hand and then spoke. Congratulations, Your Majesty, for harvesting another vast and fertile land, and the great cause of the eastward advance has been expanded. On the other side, Intelligence Minister Varys spoke softly. Most of the masculinity of men comes from the lower body. After Varys was cut off, his speech inevitably became feminine. The civil war in the Kingdom of the Three Daughters ended. Because of the previous secret agreement, Viserys granted the Imperial Ministry of Internal Affairs the privilege to act according to circumstances. Therefore, Ramsay asked Viserys for a pardon decree and 3 enthronement decrees. Among them, the pardon decree was for Humphrey Hightower. The decree had the Targaryen family emblem stamped by Viserys himself, pardoning Humphrey Hightower and the former Hightower family of Oldtown, allowing them to return to the imperial system. 2 of the other 3 edicts of enthronement were left for Salad Hassan, who claimed to be the Prince of Mia, and Trigo Moran, the former wealthy governor who had just succeeded in a coup and seized power and proclaimed himself the Prince of Lies. They will be appointed by the Empire, and nominally as one of the vassals of the Empire. The 2 city-states of Lies and Me will be incorporated into the Empire's territory like Pentus and Indolus. However, the difference is that, although the Empire accepts their allegiance, it will not give them any actual support, and the Kingdom of the Three Daughters can still maintain a greater degree of independence, just like Dawn, maintaining a transcendent status. The Kingdom of the Three Daughters is considered an independent special zone in the Empire's system. In Varys' words, there is no need to rush this matter. As long as the Empire continues to remain strong, it is only a matter of time before they are incorporated into the system. In this trap, the person who suffered the most was the Grand Lord of Tirosh. He blocked the fate of the entire city-state for this battle, but he did not expect that he would fail under the alliance of the spies of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Tirosh also lost the ability and confidence to unify the Kingdom of the Three Daughters. If nothing unexpected happened, it would be in a state of collapse within at least 10 years. The last enthronement document that Ramsay Bolton got was for the Lord of Tirosh, but the political situation in Tirosh was slightly different from that in the other 2 city-states. Mir and Lies both implemented the Governor's Council system, and the governors came from local wealthy merchants or ancient families, but the Lord of Tirosh was similar to the seeking system of Bravus, which was elected. Although the election in Tirosh was full of darkness and bribery, it was also fundamentally different from the Governor's Council, and the degree of public reaction must be considered. However, Ramsay claimed in the letter that he had the ability to make the Lord of Tirosh submit obediently, so Viserys did not ask too much. The Kingdom of the Three Daughters was equivalent to picking it up for free, without paying too much. By inciting their civil war and killing each other, he finally picked up 3 wealthy free trade city-states. What else do you want? What he cares more about is the monster mentioned in Asher's letter. Asher and her fleet were on a diplomatic mission on behalf of the Empire. Now that they were in Volantis, thousands of miles away from the mainland, it would be impossible for her to ride to King's Landing in such a short time. Instead, the letter was relayed by Bessie. I have seen this kind of monster in a book before. Varys and Viserys were walking and talking in the garden of the Red Castle, and Viserys said calmly. The book he was talking about was the Diary of Gillian Lannister. What's interesting is that the person who revealed Gillian's true identity is now standing here. It was Varys' little bird that revealed the identity of Maester Gunnar, which made Viserys realize that Maester Gunnar actually had another identity. The Maester who was actually sent by the Citadel had already died on the way. After Gillian was killed by Viserys with poisoned wine, some of his relics were found in his bedroom, including his diary, which recorded his escape from the exploration of the ruins of Valyria. It seemed that he was attacked by a half-man, half-fish monster. However, Viserys never doubted whether the monster that attacked Asher was Gillian, because the story was too far-fetched. In fact, Gillian's grave was dug up shortly after his death, and his body disappeared. Viserys did not take it too seriously. He was sure that Gillian must have died before the burial, but he didn't know who stole his body. It's really chilling that there are such monsters in the world. I don't want to be bitten off my neck by a monster in my sleep. The bold eunuch shrugged his shoulders and said, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would definitely not believe it. But now that the White Walkers have appeared, it's not surprising that there are so many monsters in this world. Varys was telling the truth. This world also made Viserys more and more confused. He didn't know if it was because his existence interfered with the normal operation of this world, so that the White Walkers went south earlier and various monsters appeared frequently in the world. According to the original time point, he is still begging in Pentus with his sister, being a veritable beggar king. Jon Arryn has not been poisoned, Eddard Stark has not gone south, and all the stories have not begun. But now, the changes that make him feel unfamiliar have been presented, which is completely different from the world he thought should be presented. Originally, Viserys thought that the biggest boss in this world was the White Walker, but now the mysterious Sea of Smoke has begun to riot. There are a large number of monsters hidden in the ruins of Illyria. The deeper you know, the more you feel that there is no cure. If they all start to walk out of the ruins in the future, the consequences may be disastrous. And according to Ash's description, this half a man, half fish monster really has the shadow of the monsters in the ruins of Illyria. They are all like possessed, crazy, bloodthirsty, and their physical fitness has also been greatly improved. Is it true that the various monsters in the ruins of Illyria began to flee with the riot of the Sea of Smoke? Recently, there seems to be news that ships have disappeared near the Sea of Smoke, and the Sea of Smoke is still expanding at a slow speed. Viserys felt a little headache. On the one hand, the White Walker issue had not been resolved, like a sword hanging over his head. On the other hand, if there were any problems with the Valyrian ruins, he would be too busy to take care of them. Because Viserys had personally entered the Valyrian ruins and escaped from them, he knew that the Lost Continent also contained a huge crisis that could destroy the entire world, which was no worse than the White Walkers, and even stronger. I hope nothing will happen. The silver-haired young man frowned slightly and said silently in his heart. Chapter 732, Capturing Monsters. But Binero, the supreme priest of the Red God, is also worth keeping an eye on, Your Majesty. On the other side, Varys spoke up at this time. I have received some news that the Red God believers in the East Continent are not very content with the status quo recently. They have planned many riots and even burned the statue of the Black Goat God in Koha, causing a tense atmosphere in the city of Koha. The people of Koha believe in the Black Goat God, just like the Lies people believe in the goddess of lust and the Taroshi people believe in the three-headed god. It is considered a native religion. However, the Red God believers are spread all over the East Continent, and there are also many believers even in the bases of these native religions. Viserys turned his head slightly when he heard this. Some time ago, Norvus suddenly began to expel the Red God believers. Did he foresee that they would start a riot? I think so. Varys nodded and said, the old monk in Norvus is said to be one of the oldest people in the world. His rich experience is enough for him to make the most correct choice. Just experience? Viserys frowned when he heard this, and his lavender eyes flickered slightly. It seems that I have a chance to meet him in person. But he is too old. I just hope he can live to see that day. There was a drizzle outside the window. Volantis occupies the estuary of the Rhine River and extends northward along both banks to the hills and swamps in the interior. Therefore, the climate here is humid and hot all year round. Due to its geographical location, when Westeros is approaching winter, Volantis is still in the midsummer stage. But now that Westeros is in the midsummer, the temperature in Volantis is so high that it is unbearable. Asha sat in her room and looked at the rain outside the window, feeling a little uneasy. The beams, steps, walls, arches, high towers and the air corridors between the towers of the Temple of R'hllor in the rain were all immersed in the cold rain, and the flames that used to burn brightly were all extinguished and fell into darkness. This was the darkest night Asha had seen during her stay here. In the past, the Temple of R'hllor would be brightly lit, with torches lit everywhere to dispel the darkness. However, this aggravated Asha's inner uneasiness, because the last time it rained in the city, she was attacked by the half-a-man, half-fish monster. That day, the world outside was as dark as today. Will this monster come today? The woman with short black hair sat in front of the window with a frown. She had lived in the Temple of R'hllor for a while. Because of the itinerary, they would set sail for their final destination, the island of Nath on the Summer Sea, the day after tomorrow at the latest. If the monster did not attack them in the past 2 days, they would probably have to rely on themselves when they reach the sea in the future. Asha's uncle Victorian was also recovering from his injuries recently. It was not a trivial matter to have a piece of flesh torn off his arm, especially for today's medical conditions. However, Victorian had a good physical condition. Although he had a fever for a few days, he finally managed to get through it. Now he can walk normally, but he still can't do some heavy physical work, can't fight, and his arm is wrapped in thick bandages. I hope everything goes well. Asha frowned and looked down at the dagger on the table, then sighed. She didn't expect that she would encounter so many things during this voyage and even escape death twice. She thought it was just a mission without difficulty, but it was thrilling. However, when Asha was thinking about it, her ears moved slightly, and suddenly she heard a slight sound coming from the window outside. What's the sound? The woman with short black hair was stunned for a moment, and then she reacted. It's coming. Asha shuddered and hurriedly grabbed the dagger on the table. Then she saw a dark figure outside the window of her room, and a pair of bloody eyes stuck to the window. At this moment, Jillian's brain was already in chaos. A pair of scalded eyes found Asha's figure, and then suddenly condensed into a vertical pupil, full of dangerous aura, and his voice became low and hoarse. Die. He had completely transformed into a demonized monster, just like the one he saw in the ruins of Illyria. But killing this woman was Gillian's last goal when he had sanity, so it was deeply imprinted in his chaotic brain and became what he had to do after he turned into a monster. The existence of the Temple of Rula made it sense the breath of danger, but as Binero said, the newly born monsters did not know the height of the sky and the thickness of the earth, so Gillian's figure finally appeared here. But this time Gillian became much smarter. He did not rush in directly to kill, but sneaked in quietly without alerting the enemy, using the grey rain curtain to cover his figure. Finally, he found the location of Asha Greyjoy, then suddenly broke the window and rushed in, ready to tear the other party into pieces. However, at this moment, a roar suddenly came from outside the room where Asha lived. Death to you, monster! A tall red-robed monk suddenly broke through the door. His skin was as black as asphalt, his belly was round, his beard was winding out, and his cheeks and forehead were covered with red flame tattoos. He was the red-robed monk Makoro, the right-hand man of the supreme priest of the Red God. He was arranged by Binero to live in the room next to Asha Greyjoy as a trap, waiting for the monster named Deep Diver to come to the door. However, it rained a little today, and the monster really took advantage of the rain and sneaked into the Temple of Rula with the intention of committing a crime, but was caught by Makoro. The monster that just broke in was originally going to kill Asha, but Makoro attracted all his attention, and then it roared and pounced on Makoro. But this black tower-like red-robed monk did not panic at all in the face of the menacing monster. He grabbed a wine jug like good with one hand, opened the lid, and took a sip, then suddenly sprayed out at the half-man, half-fish monster that pounced on him. A hot and bright flame spurted out of Makiro's mouth, instantly illuminating the entire room. The monster named Deep Diver was caught off guard and directly hit the flames that spewed out of Makiro's mouth, and instantly let out a shrill scream. This kind of flame seemed to have great restraint on him. Gillian screamed, it was frightened, and fled to the window in panic, but at this time the window was surrounded by countless holy fire hands in the temple, and the person leading it was Binero, the supreme priest of the Red God cult. Chapter 733 Sacrifice. See the essence of the world, the truth surrounds you, and everything is clear at a glance. The night is dark and dangerous, the day is bright and prosperous. At night, it was quiet. However, the Temple of Rula was brightly lit, and the holy fire hands guarding the temple knelt on the ground, singing the song of truth together. Gillian fell into a trap in this attack, was seriously injured and captured alive, and now he was tied to a makeshift stake with chains, still roaring from his mouth, and it seemed that he had completely lost his mind and completely turned into a monster. The supreme priest of the Red God, Binero, personally presided over this sacrifice. He led the believers to chant, and then used some kind of magic to point to the moon with one hand, and then shook his fist. When his voice reached the highest point, the flame spurted directly from his palm. This sudden display of unique skills startled Asha Greyjoy, who was watching the ceremony, Victorian who was wearing bandages, and several iron races who lived with them in the temple. They used to live on the boring iron islands, where apart from cheap iron ore, even food could not be grown. It was a truly barren place. Where had these iron races ever seen such tricks? Even if they lived in the Temple of Rula for a while longer, it was hard to say what Asha and Victorian would do, but the iron races behind them might have been unable to resist converting to the Red God. After all, the priests of the Red God cult were very good at attracting believers, otherwise they would not have flourished all over the world. Binero's palm sent out a fireball to ignite the firewood under the altar, and then the flames began to burn slowly, and the singing of the believers below the stage became more fanatical. However, Bonero was not satisfied with this speed, and then he shot out 2 more fireballs with his left and right hands at the same time, completely igniting all the firewood under the altar, and a huge fire burned. Although Gian, who was trapped on the altar, had a chaotic mind and completely turned into a monster without human will, he still retained the instincts of primitive animals. It seemed to sense the danger and began to struggle madly, making a sharp howl. The sound almost drowned out the chanting of the holy fire hands with flames tattooed on their cheeks below, but it was of no avail. The supreme priest stood in front of the altar, staring at the blazing flames in front of him, which gradually engulfed the monster. His eyes did not waver at all, and he was still muttering. The red-robed monks standing behind him also had a calm face, and were not startled until Gillian's screams reached their peak. Raw, the half-a-man, half-fish shadow in the flames kept struggling, and then finally fell down slowly. The screams gradually stopped, and the red-robed monks breathed a sigh of relief. It had cost a heavy price to capture this crazy monster. Several holy fire hands were torn to pieces by the enemy during the siege. The holy fire hands guarding the temple of Ruler always had 1,000 people, not one more, not one less, and one more had to be added for every death. The flames finally died out slowly. The altar had been burned into ruins, and the demon in the flames had been burned to ashes, leaving only some broken bones that were collected by the red-robed monks who came later with wooden boxes. Its bones will also become a prop for believers to visit in the future. After all, this was a real demon burned alive by the red-robed monks. With such evidence, why worry about not attracting more believers? The monster has been sacrificed to the true God, and it should not attack the messenger next time. At this time, Bonero, who had presided over the sacrifice ceremony, walked towards Asher and Victorian, who were still a little shocked, and said, "Has he really been burned to death?" Just now. Hearing Asher's question, Bonero tilted his head slightly and looked at the red-robed monks who were picking up the demon's bones. Asher also looked up. The monster had been burned like this. If it was still alive, it would be too against the will of heaven. It's just a little insignificant means given by the true God. Flame is power. Bonero then spoke calmly. Asher has never had such a strong urge to convert a ruler if she could get magic by believing in the red god. Because when the White Walkers and the army of the dead landed on Pike Island, Asher and his father King Balan and countless Ironmen had no means to fight against the White Walkers. In the end, the Iron Islands fell completely and became a paradise for the dead. Especially the sentence "flame is power" said by Bonero made Asher even more excited because she had seen dragons and had a strong agreement with this sentence. Perhaps if there was no magic and no dragons in this world, more weapons relying on fire would be born. However, at this time, the red-robed monk Makoro, who had saved Asher's life not long ago, also came over, and the corpse of the demon had been collected. Supreme Priest. Emissary. Priest Makoro, thank you for your help just now. Asher Greyjoy nodded slightly in gratitude. If Makoro had not suddenly taken action just now, Asher might not have escaped the attack of this monster, and Makoro did not say much, but just returned the greeting in silence. Next, I will send Makoro to King's Landing to meet His Majesty the Emperor. Bonello turned his head to look at Makoro, then turned his head and spoke. This matter had been agreed before. Asher didn't know what internal disputes there were between their Red God cult, but it was obvious that Bonello, the Supreme Priest, and Volantis, the headquarters of the Red God cult, and the confidant of His Majesty the Emperor, the priestess Melisande, who now served as the vice dean of the seminary and controlled the Red God faith in the entire Westeros, did not seem to be from the same faction. Recently, every time he talked about Melisande, Bonero seemed a little timid. It seemed that, although the other party was not a supreme priest, but just an ordinary priestess, she was not easy to mess with. And Bonero sent Makoro to King's Landing to meet the Emperor of the Empire for the reason of exploring the truth, and some purposes were to seize power. After all, Westeros is a region with great potential. The lies woven by the hypocritical gods are about to fail. More and more believers have chosen to uphold the faith of the Flaming Red Heart. Today, Westeros is truly an environment of many beliefs. There are the old gods believed in by the northern people, who came to the south, the 7 gods believed in by the traditional Andals, the rapidly developing red god believers, the natural creatures believed in by Dawn, and the drowned god with the least number of believers. Chapter 734 Summer Sea. The matter of Volantis was settled, and there was no reason for the Empire's fleet to continue to dock here. 2 days later, in the morning, the 3 archons of Volantis personally saw them off at the port. The fleet, flying the black-bottomed red dragon flag, set sail, officially bidding farewell to Volantis, and heading for their final destination, the island of Nath. Nath, also known as the Island of Butterflies, is an island off the northwest coast of Sathorias in the Summer Sea, and is also the hometown of Missandei. The fleet finally sailed to Nath. On the ship, Missandei's cousin, Miraz, the envoy of Nath, was a little excited. Because the Nath people love peace, his hometown was often attacked by pirates and slave hunting teams. Hearing that the last heir of the Valyrian freehold had reascended the Iron Throne, the tribe's patriarch sent Miraz to ask for help from the former suzerain, hoping that the heir of the freehold could regain its former glory and send a fleet to protect the safety of Nath. Before setting off, Miraz didn't have much hope, because during the Targaryen dynasty, Nath Island had sent envoys to King's Landing for help several times, but each time they were treated well, but they flatly refused to send troops. Because the cost of sending troops to Nath Island was too high, the Iron Throne couldn't afford it, and they didn't have the determination to regain the glory of their Valyrian ancestors, so they had to be frugal for the few golden dragons at the moment. Miraz didn't have much hope when he came to King's Landing this time, but he didn't expect to succeed. He became the first envoy to bring reinforcement in hundreds of years, and seeing that the reinforcement were about to arrive to save Nath Island from its tragic fate, how could Miraz not be excited? The Empire's fleet set sail, and they set off again from Volantis. The ships cut through the waves and traveled through the vast Summer Sea. The sea was calm in the first few days, and they even saw the legendary Sea of Smoke from afar. The area covered by the Sea of Smoke has now reached a very alarming level. The grey smoke that covers the sky and the sun shrouds the sea, and there is no end in sight. Moreover, the thick fog of the Sea of Smoke is still rolling, and the water seems to be boiling. It even seems that one can faintly hear the roar of some ancient creatures, which makes people feel cold on their backs and a little chilly. Where have Asher and the many crew members on the ship seen these? Seeing this scene, they couldn't help but marvel at the mystery and wonder of the world. It's really spectacular. If they hadn't gone out to sea and lived in their hometown, they would never see such a magnificent scene in their lives, and would never see the mystery of this world. What they saw and heard on this trip can even be boasted to their grandchildren, who can enjoy the coolness under the shade of the trees at the head of the village, and talk about the various scenes their grandfather saw when he went out to sea. Crash. The smoke in the Sea of Smoke is constantly rolling, and the Imperial fleet naturally knows not to approach easily. The ships of the fleet are arranged in formation, cutting through the wind and waves, and sailing on the calm sea. It is said that the monster living in Volantis escaped from this lost continent. An Imperial Navy soldier standing on the deck wearing black and red armor and a Targaryen family cloak spoke up. How many such monsters are there? Fortunately, they are all locked up in the Sea of Smoke. Otherwise, what would happen if they all ran out? These are the rumors heard in Volantis. Because it is not far from the Sea of Smoke, the people of Volantis have much richer stories and legends about the Sea of Smoke than those in Westeros. Most of the stories told by the people living in the north come from the more mysterious north, while the people living in Volantis have not heard of the stories north of the wall. They are more concerned about the continuous spread of the Sea of Smoke. Will it swallow up Volantis in the future? Asher, who was standing on the deck not far away, heard the soldiers chat. The cold sea breeze blew on her cheeks and the hair on her forehead. The woman with short black hair was somewhat silent. She didn't know if this day would come, but as someone who had personally experienced attacks by White Walkers and monsters, she didn't want this day to come. Because that means that many people have suffered. Many people have had a hard time. They just want to survive. Why should they face these disasters? Then the Empire's fleet continued to sail towards the distance against the wind and waves, and soon left the vicinity of the Sea of Smoke. The grey fog that covered the sky and the faint roar disappeared from everyone's eyes and ears. The soldiers on the ship, far away from the Sea of Smoke, became more open-minded. After all, although the days on the sea are monotonous, the scenery is still very beautiful. There are still some scattered islands on the Summer Sea. The fleet traveled according to the sea chart. Some islands were inhabited by local residents. The soldiers on the ship experienced new local customs and customs wherever they went. However, they also found that the further south they went, the darker the skin of the local residents living here was. Some islanders had dark skin, feathers as decorations, and their clothes were extremely simple, almost naked, but this was also related to the local climatic conditions. The fleet then continued to move towards the island of Nas. During this period, they also wiped out several pirates who were rampant on the summer sea, and even took down their nests. They even encountered siege by local natives during a stop. Asher also wiped out this tribe without hesitation. It was another fruitful day. The Greyjoy family originally started out as pirates. Which of the Ironmen did not master the skills of burning, killing, and looting? Therefore, Asher Greyjoy was like a fish in water in this regard. Unfortunately, the good times did not last long. Then the Empire's fleet encountered a large storm. Under Asher's command, the fleet passed through the storm with difficulty, but lost some ships and soldiers. However, Asher remembered what Viserys told her. Once the Empire's supplies arrived overseas, it would be impossible for them to arrive. Therefore, everything needed to be fought for by Asher Greyjoy herself. Viserys' meaning was very clear. The Empire's supplies would definitely not be able to keep up. The cost was too high, so Asher had to go and plunder by herself. That is why Viserys thought that the daughter of the sea monster was the best person for this trip. Before arriving at North Island, the Empire's fleet arrived at another larger stopover. This is the Summer Islands located east of North Island. There are 3 islands here that are much larger than the Iron Islands, namely Valinor Island, Abenlu Island and Zal Island. Even the largest of them, Zal Island, is larger than all the islands of the Iron Islands combined. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 735 Tribal Chieftain. The political structure of the Summer Islands is somewhat peculiar. Although the islands are large and the population is not sparse, they have not formed a nation or country, but are in a state of warriors division. The islands of Valinor, Abenlo and Zal are all full of tribes with primitive civilizations. They do not recognize each other, but instead fight against each other, and have deep hatred. This ethnic form is somewhat similar to the Dothraki, but the Dothraki have been unified several times in history, including being strongly unified by a Mengokal who suddenly appeared. Although the 100,000 Dothraki Ironhooves were defeated on the way to the east, they should not be underestimated. The tribes of the Summer Islands have never been unified. The largest tribe on the islands is on Valinor. They have a large population and the strongest comprehensive strength. They also control the largest town on the island. This place is called Lotus Harbor. In name, it is the capital of the Summer Islands known to outsiders, but in fact, the locals here do not regard Lotus Harbor as their capital. It is just that the tribes will choose to come to Lotus Harbor when exchanging materials and trading. Conflicts between hostile tribes are prohibited here. There are 2 other towns on Valinor Island, the Last Elegy Town and the Tall Tree Town. Valinor Island is the most populous main island in the entire Summer Islands, followed by Zal and Abenlu. The fleet led by Asher Greyjoy docked at Zal, which also has 2 major indigenous tribes. One is the Red Flower Valley tribe and the other is the Sweet Lotus Valley tribe. There are many scattered small tribes under them, but their strength is weak and not worth mentioning. These small tribes must rely on the big tribes to survive. Because these 2 tribes occupy the 2 largest freshwater valley resources on the island, located at the east and west ends of Zal, of which the Red Flower Valley tribe is located in the east of the island, and the Sweet Lotus Valley tribe is located in the west of the island. And Asher Greyjoy and her fleet came to the territory of the Red Flower Valley tribe. The skin of these natives was dark and shiny, and they spoke in an incomprehensible local language. They also wore bright feather cloaks. The higher the status and position of the people in the tribe, the brighter the feather cloaks they wore. The soldiers of low status were even half-dressed, with only a feather stuck in their heads, holding a spear in their hands, or carrying a bow and arrow. However, although they were a little nervous when they saw the foreign fleet and soldiers, they were not too panicked because the Summer Islands were not a completely closed island country. Many of the tribes traded with the outside world, and occasionally there would be fleets passing through. At the same time, pirates often visited here, but they had never seen ships as large as the Imperial fleet, neat military appearance, and majestic soldiers. The natives of the Red Flower Valley tribe held spears and formed a loose formation, baring their teeth and claws and shouting loudly, trying to make themselves look not easy to mess with, but their eyes were nervously looking at the fleet and soldiers on the fleet docked on the coast. Asha Greyjoy was wearing fine soft armor for women, a black cloak, and standing at the bow, with a long sword hanging from her waist. "Let's get off the boat." The sea breeze blew her hair in front of her forehead. She looked at the native tribes that had arranged themselves in formation below, then took a deep breath, turned her head, and glanced at the soldiers around her, and then led several soldiers from the fleet down from the boat. On the other side, seeing someone coming down from the fleet, there was some confusion in the formation of the Red Flower Valley tribe. Then a tribal chief with grey hair, a cane in his hand, and a gorgeous bright feather cloak came over with an interpreter. He came to Asha Greyjoy, first put one hand on his chest, bowed slightly, and said something incomprehensible. The dark-skinned young interpreter next to the old chief looked a little nervous, and then after the old man finished speaking, the interpreter hurriedly asked Asha Greyjoy and the purpose of the army she brought with her in poor Valyrian and a very respectful title. High Valyrian is the most popular common language in the Summer Sea and surrounding areas, because there were small countries, city-states, and tribes within the power of the Freehold, and everyone was influenced by Valyria. However, the Dragon Kings of Valyria did not fancy this land at the time, so they did not forcefully occupy and transform them, so today the Summer Islands still maintain their original appearance. After such a long period of travel and mission, Asha has also mastered some Valyrian that can be communicated normally. Once the two communicated, the misunderstanding was resolved, and soon the nervousness on the face of the tribal chief disappeared. But there was still some doubt in his eyes, because he did not expect that the other party actually claimed to be the fleet of the Valyrian Empire. The Freehold has been rebuilt in the west. Although the Freehold did not occupy this land in the past, it still had a profound impact on the indigenous people on the island. After all, they have such a powerful neighbor next to them. The huge empire is like a mountain that makes the indigenous chiefs of the Summer Islands breathless. However, in the end, the Freehold seemed to be wrathed by the gods and suddenly collapsed overnight. The tsunami that night also hit the Summer Islands, causing tragic casualties and leaving a deep memory for the natives, but the mountain that weighed on their heads also disappeared. After all, after the collapse of Valyria, there were no powerful neighbors around the Summer Islands, and no one would go so far to invade them at such a high cost. However, it was unexpected that after hundreds of years, another fleet calling itself the Valyrian Empire came to the Summer Islands. Then the chief of the Red Flower Valley tribe talked for a long time, and the translator repeated his words. It's not that the chief of the tribe had never heard of the names of Westeros and the Iron Throne. He had heard this name from the sailors, who came and went. But Westeros was too far away for them. In the eyes of the people of the Summer Islands, Westeros was an island slightly larger than the Summer Islands, perhaps as large as the Valyrian Peninsula. After all, Valyria was the end of the world for them, and the local natives might not be able to run far in their lifetime. The old chief of the Red Flower Valley tribe mentioned a name to Asha, Jalabathor. Chapter 736 Golden Heart Wooden Bow. Jalabathor was the prince of the former Red Flower Valley tribe, or more precisely, the son of the previous chief. A few years after the War of the Usurper, a fierce civil war broke out in the Red Flower Valley tribe on Zell Island. Jalaba's father, the chief at the time, was killed by his own people, and Jalabathor fled overseas in a hurry by boat. He wandered all the way to the continent of Essos, lobbying city-states in various places in the hope of helping him regain his tribe, but was ruthlessly rejected and ridiculed by city-states in various places. Later, until Jalabathor finally came to King's Landing, King Robert was somewhat tempted by the honor of conquering the Summer Islands, but was opposed by his ministers. At that time, the Iron Throne was burdened with huge foreign debts, and was unable to launch an expedition, so he had to give up in the end. Later, Jalabathor did not give up and came to Viserys, but was also rejected. But now the prince of the Red Flower Valley tribe has simply given up on himself and stayed in King's Landing to squander every day. Anyway, the gold, silver and jewelry he brought when he escaped were enough for him to live a carefree life. The chief of the Red Flower Valley tribe is the one who usurped the position of Jalabathor's father. He was once a priest in the tribe, but he became the new chief after killing the chief. However, he is already old and needs a cane to walk. The chief of the Red Flower Valley tribe carefully asked Asher to confirm that they were not invited by Jalabathor to attack the Summer Islands. After receiving a negative answer, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Asher actually saw this dark-skinned fat man when she was in King's Landing. Most people in this city regarded him as a strange laughingstock. After all, the other party's appearance and dress were different from everyone else, and he was often drunk. Asher came to the Red Flower Valley tribe to recruit some soldiers to make up for the losses of the storm, and also to replenish supplies for the last time, because they would arrive at Nars Island a few days away from here. The female general who claimed to be from the Valyrian Empire stated her intention, and the chief of the Red Flower Valley tribe immediately agreed. In fact, there was nothing he could do if he didn't agree. The Empire's fleet was lined up on the sea, ready to rob if he didn't agree. Then the chieftain kindly invited Asher to visit the tribe, and Asher had to agree, even though she couldn't refuse. The fleet lost several small warships and hundreds of soldiers while passing through the storm. There were still many young and strong people in the Red Flower Valley tribe who were willing to join the fleet. The main reason was that the Empire's fleet blocked their doorsteps with great momentum, which left them with a deep shock, and they wanted to go out and take a look. And their tribal chieftain had no way to stop it, so he had to let it go. Asher also learned some about the culture of this land during her short visit to the Red Flower Valley tribe. After all, the Summer Islands would be her neighbors for some time to come, and it was very necessary to establish good relations with the neighbors in advance. In the Summer Islands, people believe that bed skills are important and even sacred skills, because they are related to the survival of the race, and they regard reproduction as the most sacred sport. Moreover, prostitutes are also respected in this land, and even some people of noble birth on the island engage in this profession. The natives of the Summer Islands respect their elders. To pay tribute to the dead, their customs include drinking and having sex. Archery is another important cultural skill here. Their special bows have a much longer range than others. The Summer Islands are rich in a special tree called the Golden Heart. Bows and arrows made from this tree can be shot very far. Most of the warriors on the island are sharpshooters. At the same time, the people of the Summer Islands also brew a kind of amber sweet wine. They don't grow much food, and they mainly eat fruits and fish. Asher tasted this sweet and delicious wine at the tribal banquet. She even thought it was sweeter than the wine produced in King Island, but because it was too sweet, it lacked some stimulation. The chief of the Red Flower Valley tribe also emphasized introducing his son to Asher. Looking at the dark-skinned man in front of her, wearing colorful feathers, constantly showing off his muscles in front of Asher, just like a male peacock seeking a mate, Asher resisted the desire to complain. The chief's purpose was clear. He wanted to marry his son to this imperial female general with a large army. This was equivalent to preparing a protective umbrella for him. After his death, he would not have to repeat the same mistakes, and the Red Flower Valley tribe would no longer have to endure the bullying of the Sweet Lotus Valley tribe on the other side of Zell Island. In recent decades, the Red Flower Valley tribe has been inferior to its mortal enemy on the other side of the island, especially after the outbreak of the Civil War. Now the Red Flower Valley tribe has been swallowing its anger. After seeing this powerful army passing by, the chief wanted to win them over. Unfortunately, the chief's beauty plan was somewhat ineffective. Asher was not very interested in the male peacock with gorgeous clothes, and the chief's son Zadodel had to retreat to the side and drink in silence. Fresh water is scarce on the island, so these tribes can only rely on the Red Flower Valley tribe. The chief of the Red Flower Valley tribe talked eloquently, mainly to promote how powerful the Red Flower Valley tribe is, second only to the three major tribes on the island of Lano, hoping to gain the friendship of the Imperial Navy. And Asher gradually deepened her understanding of this mysterious land that almost no Westeros people have set foot on during the chat with the chief. She was quite interested in the golden heart trees that are abundant on the local island and the bows and arrows made of this wood, because she had just seen the performance of the soldiers of the tribe with her own eyes. After pulling a golden longbow, it generated more than 100 pounds of tension, and easily shot out a distance of more than 280 yards, and nailed it hard on the tree trunk. This force was still enough to penetrate the enemy's leather armor at a distance of 280 yards. In Westeros, most longbows can hardly shoot at such a distance and force, and most of them are less than 250 yards. Asher wanted to purchase a batch of such golden heartwood bows from the chief of the Red Flower Valley tribe. If it were a city like Volantis, it might cost a lot to buy such bows and arrows, but in the origin of the Summer Islands, there is as much golden heartwood as you want, and the price is not very expensive. The chief also wanted to win over the Empire's fleet, so naturally he didn't want a high price, and he agreed immediately. There are not many golden heartwoods in Red Flower Valley. Golden heartwood is produced here on the Golden Head Peninsula. The chief promised to send tribesmen from the tribe to the Golden Head Peninsula to cut down golden heartwood and then provide golden heartwood bows for the Imperial Army. Chief Del, why is this place called the Golden Head Peninsula? Asher looked at the map pointed by the chief's finger and felt that the name was a little strange, so she asked casually, "Oh, because someone once picked up a gold as big as a human head here, and it also looked like a human head, so it was called the Golden Head Peninsula." The chief heard the translator repeat Asher's question, waved his hand and said nonchalantly, and Asher was slightly stunned when she heard his words. Chapter 737 Jinshao Peninsula. The Imperial fleet temporarily repaired at the estuary of Red Flower Valley and recruited warriors from the Red Flower Valley tribe, including the surrounding tribes that depended on it, totaling more than 200 people, to make up for the losses caused by the storm. And Asher also placed an order with the Red Flower Valley tribe, exchanging many goods and materials purchased in the trading city-states with the Red Flower Valley tribe. The tribesmen on the Summer Islands are actually not very interested in gold coins. On the contrary, they are quite curious about things in the outside world, especially handmade carpets from the handmade glassware, exquisite silverware, lace, wool, fire dragon pepper, etc. These are actually the reasons why Asher stays in each place for a while. In addition to purchasing some necessary supplies, the fleet also buys some local specialties to sell in the next city-state. The basic operating rules of the caravan are so simple, as long as the things in one place are sold to another place, of course. The premise is that the place where they are taken cannot also be rich in such things, otherwise the goods will be smashed in their hands. Asher also knew that she couldn't rely solely on looting to get supplies, so she made plans in advance and operated it in the way of a caravan. This was also an unknown adventure for her. After all, she had never done any business, but fortunately Asher made the right bet. The chiefs of the Summer Islands liked these goods from the outside world, but were not very interested in gold coins. Because the mineral resources on the Summer Islands are very rich, but the communication with the outside world is relatively poor. Even if a fleet comes here, the number of goods brought is very small. And most of these fleets are under the idea of exploiting the natives, selling many cheap goods at sky-high prices in exchange for the gold coins that the natives can't spend, and the local specialties of the Summer Islands. However, the goods brought by Asher are extremely rich, and the chief of the Red Flower Valley tribe is dazzled, and the chiefs of other small tribes around the Red Flower Valley tribe also rushed over. In the end, the chief waved his hand and exchanged 10 exquisite handmade carpets, some glassware and 2 cans of fire dragon pepper for 1,000 golden heartwood longbows. Then they did what they said. The laborers in the indigenous tribes had nothing to do except hunting, fishing, and picking wild fruits. Therefore, under the chief's mobilization, they came to the Golden Head Peninsula to cut down a large amount of golden heartwood to make golden heartwood longbows. For the indigenous chiefs of the Summer Islands, there were as many golden heartwoods as they wanted, which was like picking them up for free. Therefore, they did not feel that they were at a disadvantage at all, but made a lot of money. And the craftsmanship and time cost of making longbows were not paid by him. He only needed to order the tribesmen to work. He claimed that anyone who dared to disobey him would be punished by the gods. The chief's former occupation was a sacrifice in the tribe, so he had no flaws in bluffing people, so he made the tribesmen work obediently. The work in the Red Flower Valley tribe was booming. Because there were enough craftsmen, it took about half a month to complete the production of 1,000 golden heartwood longbows. During this time, Asher also took people to run around the Golden Head Peninsula in the name of visiting. But the Red Flower Valley tribe members who were logging found that these outsiders did not seem to be visiting at all, but seemed to be looking for something. They carried shovels and other tools with them, constantly looking for something on the hillside, gravel, and river beach. The natives of the tribe told their chief about this, and the chief did not doubt it. He just thought that they were a little curious about their first visit to the Summer Islands, so he let them go. Asher and others were not visiting, but looking for something. At the tribal banquet, she heard the chief casually say that the name of the Golden Head Peninsula came from a person who picked up a piece of gold as big as a human head here. There is no doubt that the listener has a mind. Asher suspected that there were large reserves of gold mines on the Golden Head Peninsula. She lived in the Iron Islands since she was a child. Although there were no gold mines on the Iron Islands, there were a lot of iron ore, so Asher was very familiar with minerals. This kind of large piece of unrefined gold can only be seen if someone deliberately put it here. Otherwise there is a large reserve of gold mines underground here. But think about it, although the people on the Summer Islands don't care too much about gold coins, after all, this is the only currency in circulation on the Summer Islands. In addition to the most common barter, people also use gold coins to exchange for things. Because the natives of the Summer Islands know that, although these gold coins cannot be eaten or drunk, those outsiders like them. They see the gold coins one by one, as if they have seen their parents. These gold coins can be collected and exchanged with people outside, so gold coins also have a certain value on the Summer Islands. So who would throw a gold the size of a human head on the ground? Asher doesn't believe it. Therefore, there is only one reason. There may be a gold mine on the Golden Head Peninsula. This bold guess made Asher's heart beat faster. What is the concept of a gold mine? This means sustainable wealth for a long time, which means sustainable pie in the sky. The West is so rich. According to legend, Tywin Lannister's shit is all gold. Why isn't it relying on the gold mines in the West? If there is really a gold mine here, plus the reason why Asher's uncle Victorian encouraged her, she could really suddenly turn against him and take down an island and crown herself king here. Grand Duchess of the Summer Islands? Or even more so, Queen of the Summer Islands? Asher was really moved, but she was not a brainless and irrational person. She suppressed her excitement and did not tell too many people about this except her uncle. Perhaps because Victorian's injury had not yet healed, his face looked a little ugly, but Asher, who was in a state of joy, did not notice this. Then Asher led several confidants to search for traces of gold mines all over the mountains of the Golden Head Peninsula. Although she was very familiar with iron ore, Asher had never come into contact with gold mines. She and her iron races did not know how to find gold mines, so they could only cast a wide net aimlessly, hoping to catch a dead mouse. But unfortunately, perhaps Asher guessed wrong. There was no gold mine here. The legend of the Golden Head Peninsula was just a legend. The Red Flower Valley tribe made a longbow for half a month. They ran here for half a month, but they did not gain anything, and they did not even see the shadow of the gold mine. However, at this moment, bad news suddenly came. An Ironborn who stayed on the ship ran to report to Asher, claiming that her uncle Victorian suddenly fainted. Chapter 738, The Curse of Illyria. What? When Asher heard what the soldier who came to report said, her face suddenly changed. Although she had quarreled with her uncle several times, because of ideological reasons, Victorian was her last relative after all. How could Asher remain indifferent after hearing such news? Quick, go back immediately. Then Asher didn't care about looking for gold here anymore, but climbed on the warhorse with her followers and rushed to the beach, where the fleet was docked. At this moment, Victorian's condition was not very good. His face was pale, and he had fallen into unconsciousness. White foam was still spitting out of his mouth. In fact, Victorian had noticed that his condition was not right a long time ago, but he didn't take it too seriously at that time. As the former captain of the invincible Iron Victory and the most capable third son of the Greyjoy family, Victarion had suffered countless injuries of varying sizes in his life, and there were many more serious ones than this. He didn't take this minor injury seriously, and had been holding on all the time. This morning, he suddenly had a bad premonition. Victarion felt his body getting hot, as if the blood in his body was boiling, especially at the wound. He suddenly felt hot, as if a branding iron was placed on his arm. Victarion thought there was something wrong with the wound he bandaged, or there was something wrong with the herbs he was covering. He then tore open the bandage and fainted, falling headfirst onto the deck. Fortunately, Victarion fainted and was noticed by the soldiers around him. They lifted him onto the bed in the cabin in time, and called in the accompanying doctor for treatment. Before Asher arrived, the accompanying doctor had already bled Victarion. In this era of lack of medical technology, people generally use these simple methods to treat diseases, such as bleeding, burning, cutting off rotten flesh, and some anesthetic herbs or anti-infection and antibacterial herbs. Thump, thump, thump. At this moment, there were hurried footsteps outside the cabin door, and then with a bang, Asher hurriedly pushed the door open and walked in. Then she saw her uncle lying on the sick bed, pale and weak, but he had already woken up. On the other side, the doctor accompanying the army was using a clamp to clamp the leech full of blood back into the bottle. Sir. The doctor hurriedly stood up and wanted to salute, but Asher ignored him and looked at her uncle with a sharp gaze. Seeing that he was fine, she breathed a sigh of relief and turned around to ask, "What's going on?" In fact, unmarried girls of noble birth like Asher should be respectfully called Miss, while older or married people would be called Madam, not Sir or General, but Asher didn't like such addresses for women, so she asked everyone to change. The knight's wound is healing well, and there is no infection. Perhaps it is, because he is not used to the climate in a foreign country for the first time. The doctor from King's Landing hesitated and spoke. He initially thought that Victarion's wound was infected, but after a careful examination, he found that his wound was not abnormal at all, and based on his strong body, it recovered well. Therefore, the doctor, who really didn't know how to start, chose to bleed him. After all, he also treated the poor in King's Landing, and his master once told him that when he was in doubt, he should bleed him first. However, he didn't expect that he used the leeches he raised to bleed Victarion a little, and he really woke up again. It's just not clear whether this is a blind cat meeting a dead mouse. "I'm not a knight, old man." Victarion, who was lying on the bed, suddenly spoke at this time. His voice was a little dull, and then he sat up from the bed. He raised his injured arm and looked at it. The wound had almost healed. Then he clenched his fist. The strong muscles on his arm bulged. There was a slight tearing pain at the wound. Everything was normal, as if nothing had happened. He didn't know why he suddenly fainted just now, but now the heat in his body had dissipated, as if he had just dreamed, but he knew that it was not a dream. And what was going on with the itching on his back? "Uncle." Asher saw that Victarion had just woken up and sat up, frowning slightly. "How do you feel now?" "Not bad." Victarion nodded briefly, and at this moment, his hand seemed to touch something, and then he paused slightly. Victarion, whose long black hair was mixed with some grey, had a rare change of expression on his face. He even tightened his breathing for a moment, as if he had thought of something. "What's wrong?" Asher keenly noticed the abnormality of her uncle and asked quickly. "Asher, let everyone else leave first." Victarion's face was tense, his brows were knitted into a knot, and after a long silence, he slowly spoke. "I'll tell you alone." When everyone heard his words, they all looked at each other, and then looked at Asher. After receiving a positive answer, everyone except her left, and only Asher and Victarion were left in the cabin. "What happened, uncle?" the woman with short black hair asked impatiently. However, Victarion did not speak in a hurry, but turned around, took off his shirt, and revealed his strong back. Asher did not understand what her uncle was doing at first, but when she saw Victarion's back clearly, her face suddenly changed. "This is..." Asher Greyjoy was shocked, with disbelief written all over her face, because she saw a small piece of fish scales on Victarion's back skin that had grown out at some unknown time, just like the scales on the monster when she was attacked. Why is this happening? Could it be? Asha's face changed drastically, and she asked anxiously. She remembered that Victorian had been bitten by the monster before. Could he have been infected at that time? She didn't expect that this monster was actually created by a virus. Could it be a variant of grayscale disease? But Asha immediately denied this, because she had been in close contact with the monster before. There was still an essential difference between that monster and the stone people. This is like a curse. Chapter 739 Lizardhead Base. What should I do? Will you become that monster too, uncle? Asha Greyjoy saw the fish scales growing on Victorian's back. Although it was only a small piece, it was almost foreseeable that, if no intervention was taken, he would grow into the appearance of that monster in the future. Asha's words also made Victorian silent. In fact, he had thought of this possibility when he felt the itch on his back and touched the fish scales, but he was still reluctant to face it. However, his niece's words punctured his fantasy in a very realistic way. Will I become a monster like that? Victorian thought of the scene when the half-man, half-fish monster pounced on him that night, then clenched his fists slightly, closed his eyes, and spoke in a hoarse voice. No, I won't. If this day really comes, I will choose to leave on my own or commit suicide. Although Victorian did not abide by honor as much as Eddard Stark and John Connington, he also had his own inner persistence. On the battlefield, he is a calm commander and a brave warrior, and outside the battlefield, he often evaluates his enemies with respect. If one day he is going to become a monster, Victorian's most preferred method is to jump into the sea and let the drowned god take him away, but based on his previous understanding of that monster, this method may not work. It is slowly eating away and changing my body. Then Victorian spoke, and he saw the sadness on Asha's cheeks, and then the former commander-in-chief of the Iron Fleet frowned. Don't mourn for me now. I won't die so easily. Victorian clenched his fists. Except for the sudden fainting not long ago, he felt that he was in good condition. The great drowned god will protect me, and I can still control this feeling. The feeling of this change was not very strong. Victorian believed that he could still control this change in a short period of time. Maybe he could find a treatment during this period and survive. If there is no treatment, the worst result is nothing more than death. As a warrior, he had been ready to die at any time, but he didn't expect that he would not die on the battlefield, but died from an unknown virus or curse. The short-haired woman calmed down a lot after hearing her uncle's words. Now this change has just begun, and Victorian should still have a lot of time. If so, the monster that attacked him was once a human. Thinking of the fact that the other party did speak human language, Asha couldn't help but shudder slightly. She couldn't accept the departure of her few trusted relatives, and she couldn't accept that Victorian would end up like this. Then Asha opened her mouth. She wanted to ask if the red-robed monks had any treatment methods. After all, the other party had the means to deal with monsters. But thinking of the scene where the monster was captured alive and burned to death, Asha immediately backed off, and Victorian also thought of this scene. He shook his head slightly and spoke in a low voice. If I fall into their hands, I may not escape the fate of being burned to death. I don't want to be burned alive like that monster. This is not the way an Ironborn should die. The Red Monk's methods of action are extremely paranoid. In their eyes, the world is either black or white. As long as they can achieve their goals, they will do whatever it takes. There is no legal or moral restraint. Everything is just as long as it is crowned with the will of God. A cursed person like Victorian may be burned to death without a word in their hands, but he doesn't want to fall into their trap. I still have a few years. Let's wait and see. Then Victorian added in a low voice. Asha Greyjoy did not find any traces of gold mines on the Golden Head Peninsula, but she did not give up easily. She was sure that her guess was correct. Therefore, the commander-in-chief of the Imperial Fleet ordered the establishment of a small base on the small islands, called Lizard Heads north of the Golden Head Peninsula, leaving behind 200 soldiers and ships. Anyway, Zal Island is only a few days' voyage from Nass Island. If there are no suitable islands for military garrisons near Nass Island, perhaps they will come back. The freshwater resources on Zal Island are scarce, and they mainly rely on the freshwater rivers in Red Flower Valley and Sweet Lotus Valley. The reason why there are no tribes on the Golden Head Peninsula is that there are no freshwater resources. But this problem is not difficult to solve, because there are many Ironmen in the Imperial fleet who once followed Ash's father, King Baron. The Iron Islands, like the Summer Islands, do not have any freshwater river resources, so the Ironmen find groundwater by digging wells. In the end, with the help of several experienced old Ironmen in the fleet, they still found several places suitable for digging wells, and then dug out groundwater. Although the amount of well water is not large, it is more than enough to feed the 200 people in this temporary base. Therefore, the Imperial fleet established a temporary base on the Lizard Head Islands north of the Golden Head Peninsula, cut down trees to make a wall, and also made some wooden houses and tents. Then the three-headed dragon flag of the Valyrian Empire was planted, which was equivalent to announcing temporary sovereignty. If outsiders landed on the island without authorization, they would be counterattacked by the Imperial soldiers. Although the Lizard Head Islands are not on Zal Island, they are very close to the Golden Head Peninsula, and even across the sea. People can see the other side by standing on the coast and looking far away, but the area of the Lizard Head Islands is very small, and there are no other tribes on the island, so there is only a temporary base for the Imperial fleet. When the chief of the Red Flower Valley tribe heard about this, he was a little concerned at first. He was worried that these outsiders would plot against the law, but later he heard that they only left 200 people, and the location of their settlement was still on the Lizard Head Islands, so he was relieved. After all, 200 people would not pose a threat to them. At the same time, he also intended to use the name of the Imperial fleet to deter the mortal enemy Sweet Lotus Valley tribe on the other side of the same island, so that the other side would be more restrained and not so unscrupulous. After all, the Sweet Lotus Valley tribe now has the upper hand. Therefore, the chief of the Red Flower Valley tribe chose to ignore the Imperial fleet's camping. Then, a few days later, 1,000 golden hood bows were delivered in exchange for some supplies from the fleet. Asha left her uncle Victorian at the stronghold on the Lizard Head Islands as commander, while she herself led the army to the Isle of Nath. Chapter 740, Skeleton Brotherhood. Romy, when do you think we can go home? More than a dozen ships with various flags were docked at the port. This was a prosperous and beautiful town, but it was not very popular. There was no one on the streets during the day. The blue water, the calm sea, the white and soft beach, and the endless forest in the distance. On a two-masted warship with a skull flag, a golden-haired handsome pirate sat on the bow holding his scimitar, staring blankly at the calm sea in the distance, and then asked, "How should I know?" On the other side, the one-eyed pirate named Romy, who was sitting opposite him, was a little drunk with a wine pot in his hand, and spoke impatiently. "Jack, you are not thinking about that girl again, are you? I tell you, that Lana is Harold's forbidden fruit. If you go to look for her secretly again, Harold will chop off your bottom sooner or later." Blonde Jack and One-Eyed Romy are both members of the Skeleton Brotherhood, a group of pirates galloping on the summer sea. Their most iconic feature is a flag with a skull on a black background. Merchant ships sailing on the summer sea are all terrified when they see this flag. The notorious pirate Skeleton Brotherhood is entrenched on the fly island of the Basilisk Islands not far from Nass Island. The Basilisk Islands of the Sithorius continent are now paradise for pirates, with dozens of pirates of all sizes entrenched on it. The herald mentioned by the One-Eyed Romy is the current leader of the Skeleton Brotherhood, nicknamed the Fierce Herald. He is tall and strong, 7 feet tall, with red hair and a fierce face. It is said that he can eat living people alive, so the Fierce Herald is daunting wherever he goes. But in fact, as veterans of the Skeleton Brotherhood, Jack and Romy know that Harold does not eat people, especially raw people. It is just that the reputation of cruelty that has been spread to the outside world can better intimidate the enemy. Just now, the One-Eyed Romy mentioned a girl named Lana, who was captured by the Skeleton Brotherhood during a merchant ship robbery. But because of her sweet appearance, fair skin and beautiful long golden hair, she was taken by the pirate leader Hirana, and became his favorite concubine, and even gave birth to a son for him. However, what the cruel hero didn't know was that Lana had been having an affair with his most trusted brothers. Jack was just one of her lovers. Romy knew that there were at least 3 more, but unfortunately, only Hero himself didn't know. However, Romy still warned his good brothers and fellow villagers that it would be better to have less contact with women like Lana, because he felt that this matter would be exposed sooner or later, and even if Jack was not caught, he might be implicated. Although Hero didn't eat people, he betrayed him and gave him a green hat, and the punishment he received might not be better than being eaten alive. I'm not talking about going back to the Isle of Flies. However, the handsome young man named Blonde Jack, sitting at the bow holding his scimitar, interrupted his good brother's words and spoke without turning his head. On the other side, the one-eyed dragon Romy with an eye patch was slightly stunned and did not react at the first time. I'm talking about going home. Back to Westeros. It turned out that Jack and Romy were both from Westeros. They had different lives before, but in the end, they both ended up in the remote Basilisk Islands and joined the pirates to become one of them. Jack is a member of the Lannister family's side branch. He lives in Lannisport, so he has a signature blonde hair. His father is a cheese merchant in Lannisport and has a good family background. He even donated a ship in the war against the White Walkers for the wildfire explosion on the Green Fork River. However, after the war against the White Walkers ended, a civil war broke out. Their lord, Duke Tywin Lannister, who was also the head of the clan, was defeated and fled back to the west. The Second Conquest War broke out. Aberin, the Prince of Dawn, led a Targaryen army to break through from the south and won victory after victory. Another Targaryen princess rode a dragon and set fire everywhere in the sky of the Westerlands, and the people of the Westerlands were in panic. Then the Lannister army was stabbed in the back by Euron. Lannisport fell, and Prince Dawn led his army to kill him. However, at this time, the nightmare began. Aberin ordered a massacre of members of the Lannister family, and even at one point all the golden-haired people were captured or killed. His parents were killed, and Jack fled his hometown by boat at that time. The one-eyed Romy, who was blind in one eye, came from the Iron Islands. He was Romy Pike, the illegitimate son of the Merlin family. His father was the Earl of Pebbles, a bald fat man. He left his hometown earlier than Jack. He fled his hometown by boat when the White Walkers invaded Great White Island. At that time, the island was in chaos and there were dead bodies everywhere. His father, Medred Merlin, was quite reliable. Thinking of his illegitimate son, he gave Romy a small boat for him to escape. It was unclear whether the Earl of Pebbletown escaped himself. Therefore, both of them came from the same country. Although they were from different places, they were still one of the few relatives in such a distant place, and eventually became good brothers. Fuck you, Jack. When one-eyed Romy Pike heard, and suddenly said this, he was silent for a long time, holding the wine pot in his hand, and finally uttered a word, even a little excited. We can't go home anymore. Don't you know? Both of them joined the Brotherhood of Bones for various reasons, but it is easy to join, but it is not easy to quit. Once you join a pirate group, you can't quit unless you die and are carried out and thrown off the ship. If you sneak away on the island or the port, you will be hunted down. At that time, death will be a relief. However, when the two young pirates were sitting on the bow and chatting, suddenly, the sound of a horn was heard from the distant sea. Woo! The sound of the horn was desolate and melodious, echoing across the silent sea from a long distance. The two people sitting on the boat turned their heads quickly and then saw a fleet flying the three-headed dragon flag of the Targaryen family and the golden sea monster flag of the Greyjoy family of the Iron Islands. They had covered the sea surface at some point and were heading towards this side in a mighty manner. Chapter 741 One Piece. This is Romy and Jack, two pirates who were sitting at the boat chatting, saw the fleet approaching slowly from afar, and they all stood there in a daze, unable to believe their eyes. Because this huge fleet was densely hanging two kinds of flags, the largest one was the three-headed dragon flag of the Targaryen family, and the slightly smaller one was the golden sea monster flag of the Greyjoy family. This flag may be a little unfamiliar to the people near the continent of Sithorius, but it is very familiar to Jack and Romy who were born in Westeros. Even the wine pot in Romy's hand accidentally fell on his pants, soaking him thoroughly. He shuddered and then sobered up. Jack and Romy looked at each other and saw the emotions in each other's eyes. Oh no. Fuck. Romy Pike, the one-eyed one, looked at his wet crotch, then kicked the wine pot away angrily, stood up suddenly, and drew the scimitar at his waist. On the other side, the handsome blonde pirate also reacted quickly. He drew his scimitar and shouted loudly, "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" However, without their notification, the dozen pirate warships in the entire port were all in chaos. It turned out that these pirates stayed in the cabins. For some reason, they did not get off the ship to live in the town outside. However, on the other side of the calm sea, the fleet was coming quickly. Asher Greyjoy, the commander-in-chief of the Imperial Fleet, wearing soft armor and a black cloak, stood on the bow of the fleet's flagship the Syrian with her feet on a wooden barrel, holding a telescope in her hand, looking at the pirates in the distance. Tom Corder, say hello to them. Tell the minions on the summer sea that the real pirate king is here. Asher Greyjoy's voice was indifferent, and then she put down the eye of mirror in her hand and ordered, "Destroy them." "Yes, princess." The former captain of the Iron Fleet, Tom Corder, bloodless, heard Asher Greyjoy's words. His face was grim, and then he agreed excitedly. "This is the daughter of King Balon. This is Princess Asher of the Iron Islands. Prince Theon and Princess Asher are the orthodox of the Iron Islands, and it is definitely not Euron and others who can sit on the Seaston throne. And later it seems that Euron has lost the Seaston throne. Give them a lesson they will never forget. Tell them who is the ancestor of pirates. Prepare the catapult. Fire." Tom Corder, the first mate of the Viserion, gave the order with a grin. He was once the captain of the Iron Fleet Morning, experienced many battles, participated in the Iron Islands Rebellion many years ago, burned Lannisport twice, and later escaped with Asher in the Battle of the White Walkers invading the Iron Islands. Now he is her trusted confidant. And with his order, the Imperial fleets arranged on the sea surface roared in unison. Boom boom boom. Huge rocks burning with flames flew up, and then roared towards the port of the bay and the pirate ships. How could the pirate ships in the port react when they found that the situation was not good and hurriedly wanted to pull up the anchor and set sail to rush out of the port? It was too late. How could such a huge ship move flexibly? Moreover, these pirates never thought that someone would suddenly attack from behind. The Nas people, who had always been weak and bullied, and even dared not to fight back, actually found foreign aid. Therefore, the pirate warships were trapped in the port, and they were all blocked inside before they had time to escape. Fireballs fell from the sky, illuminating the desperate emotions on the faces of the pirates, and in an instant the entire battlefield turned into a sea of fire. Boom boom boom. The huge rocks launched by the catapult smashed into the ships with flames. Some smashed through the deck directly, and some blasted a big hole from the side. The hull was burning with flames, and the pirates wailed in pain in the sea of fire. And some directly cut the tall masts on the deck, and then fell into the town, and the smoke was also everywhere. The bay, which was calm just now, turned into a devastated place in an instant, with blazing flames everywhere, and billowing black smoke rushing straight into the sky. The wailing of the pirates in the flames could be heard from a long distance away. Why did the Iron Throne's fleet come here? How do I know? On the ship of the Skeleton Brotherhood, One-Eyed Romy and Blonde Jack were lucky enough to escape the first disaster, and were not directly killed by the huge rocks falling from the sky. But the situation was not much better. There were flames everywhere around, and the ship was gradually tilting in the wailing. It was only a matter of time before it sank. Then the two looked at each other, gritted their teeth, and jumped directly into the sea. Nas Island is a unique island located off the northwest coast of Sosceles in the summer sea. There are few islands around it, and it has a calm and beautiful sea. There are no waves all year round. Most of the time, it is as beautiful as a mirror. Therefore, the character of the Nas people is also very gentle, even to the point that they are unwilling to take up arms to resist when facing invasion. They can only retreat again and again, abandoning the coast and hiding in the deep mountains and forests on the island. At the earliest time, when the ancient Gis Empire was prosperous, a ship from the ancient Gis Empire came to Nas Island, letting the people here know that there was a world outside. Later, before the Nas people knew the outside world and the slave traders landed on Nas Island, the people here participated in the long-distance trade between Essos and Westeros, and once made a lot of money, and were extremely rich. Because the environment on the island is conducive to the growth of insects, the Nas people took advantage of this advantage, and became a major silk exporter. In addition, the Nath people also export exquisite handicrafts and spiced wine. In the past, the fine texture of Nath silk could be seen from the Seven Kingdoms to the free trade cities. But unfortunately, since the doom of Valyria, the Nath people have lost the protection of their sovereign country, and their rich wealth has been coveted by unscrupulous people. Slave traders began to appear frequently in the waters near Nath Island. Therefore, the Nath people had to abandon the beautiful and peaceful coast and migrate to the inland and forests. As a result, in the past 400 years, Nath's export trade has long collapsed, and the former prosperity and wealth have all disappeared. It is difficult to find Nath silk on the market. These are what the local tribal chiefs told Asha Greyjoy when she led her fleet to Nath Island. The Imperial fleet came to Nath Island, like a god descending from the sky, destroying a large number of pirate ships with overwhelming force. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 742, A Difficult Decision. The Empire's fleet arrived and destroyed the ships of the pirates and slavers, freeing this quiet and peaceful island from the hands of the blacks. The peace-loving Nath people living on the island were originally frightened by the sudden outbreak of naval battles on the sea. With the flames of war and the smoke of gunpowder, they did not even have the courage to resist the invasion. Where had they ever seen such a scene? However, when Miraz, the Nath envoy on the Empire's fleet, got off the ship and returned to the tribe to explain the situation to everyone, the people hiding in the dense forests and shivering breathed a sigh of relief. The political structure of Nath Island is similar to that of the Summer Islands. There is no unified country. The difference is that many tribes in the Summer Islands have been fighting for years, but all tribes have no ability to unify other tribes. There is a lack of a conqueror like Egan. The Nath people are different. Because the Nath people believe in the god of harmony, they advocate peace and no conflict. Therefore, they have not formed a unified country, but have become tribes with friendly neighbors according to the division of ethnic groups. Therefore, the tribal leader of the Nath people is called chieftain instead of chieftain like the tribesmen of the Summer Islands. Although the meaning is roughly the same, both are leaders of the tribe, but the essence of the two is very different. The chieftains of the Nath people are mostly respected elders who serve all the tribesmen, rather than a powerful person who makes everyone serve him. At the same time, because their ancestors once actively participated in the world's trade system, and in the Dawn era, Nath Island had the trajectory of human activities and survival. Therefore, although the land area of Nath Island is less than 1/10 of that of the Summer Islands, the level of civilization is obviously higher. Otherwise, they would not face difficulties and actively send envoys to seek self-help. And hard work pays off. The peace-loving Nath people finally found reinforcement to protect themselves. Thank you, His Majesty, and thank you, Governor, for saving the fate of Nath Island. Facing the Imperial fleet docked at the port, the Nath tribe discussed and finally elected the tribal chief who sent Miraz to ask for help from the Iron Throne to come and greet them. This is an old man who looks very healthy. His skin is a bit brown and deep, not as dark as the tribesmen on the Summer Islands. After the war, the wreckage of ships and the bodies of pirates are floating everywhere on the sea. Miraz, the envoy of the Nath people, does not know the system of the new empire very well. In his opinion, the person who enfiafs a piece of land is the governor. There are many governors in the empire. Perhaps his expression is wrong or the patriarch has a problem with his understanding. The Nath people regarded Asher as a governor, so a beautiful misunderstanding occurred. When Asher heard about this misunderstanding, her heart moved slightly, but she did not explain it clearly, just nodded and agreed. After all, now she is leading the army more than 1,000 miles away from King's Landing. It is 10,000 miles away, but no one comes to find fault with her. She can call herself the hand of the emperor to these natives. And then Asher also learned why these pirates hid in the cabin and did not get off the ship. It turned out that there was a terrible virus on Nass Island called butterfly fever. This virus only infects non-local residents on the island, so this is why the Nath people, a peace-loving people who are even unwilling to take up arms for self-defense, have not been extinct so far. Butterfly fever protected them and repelled the ancient Gis Empire, colonists from Valyria, adventurers from Volantis, and pirates. But later, as time went by, pirates and slave hunters still found the weakness of this virus. The reason why butterfly fever is called this name is that butterflies are the carriers of this virus, and they will not be infected with this virus as long as they land at night when butterflies rest. I see. Asher Greyjoy met with the representative patriarch of the Nath people on the ship. It was for this reason that the Imperial soldiers encountered opposition from Miraz when they were preparing to land. But Asher led the fleet from afar and still needed to find a place to live. Not counting the 300 soldiers left in the Summer Islands, the fleet now has a size of less than 2,000 people. They added some soldiers when they stayed in the Summer Islands, recruited local warriors, and dispersed them into the troops. However, since so many people could not land on Nath Island to station, it was naturally impossible for them to float on the water all the time. But after consulting the respected old patriarch of the Nath people, the other party also told her that there were no islands around Nath Island. This beautiful island has been floating alone on the sea, so for a long time the Nath people have been isolated from the world until the ancient Gis Empire first discovered them. What should we do? However, after sending off the old patriarch of the Nath people, Asher Greyjoy, who was in charge of the Imperial Navy fleet, frowned, held the table in the command room of Viserion, and fell into deep thought while looking at the map. Attack the Basilisk Islands, or retreat to the Summer Islands? The two methods represent two directions and attitudes. One is extremely radical, and the other is steady. Among them, there is no doubt that retreating to the Summer Islands is a steady way. If retreating to the Summer Islands, the pirates entrenched in the Basilisk Islands will naturally chase after them if they want to retaliate. If they don't chase after them, they will give in to each other. In any case, it is a safe choice and will not make any mistakes. As for the other opposite method, Asher directly led her army to attack the Basilisk Islands. This tactic will take great risks, but it can catch the opponent off guard. High risk and high return coexist. After all, the pirates around Nass Island were all wiped out in the naval battle not long ago. Now the pirate base of the Basilisk Islands has no defense against the Imperial fleet and would never expect that a magic army would suddenly descend from the sky. And if the Imperial fleet can really destroy the pirates entrenched in the Basilisk Islands in this war, it will have the foundation to dominate the Summer Sea. In the future, it may become the overlord of the Summer Sea by constantly absorbing and growing. What should I do? The young female general from the Iron Islands, wearing fish scale soft armor, stared at the map in front of her with a sharp gaze. For the first time, she felt the pressure of holding the lives of millions of people. My lord? However, all the commanders and captains of the fleet turned their eyes to her. Although Asher's face was cold and serious, her palms were actually sweating. Because only now could she understand what Viserys told her before sending her away. When you reach the end of the world, you need to think carefully about any decision you make. Asher. Because you have no one to back you up except for the tiger skin. I believe you can return safely. On the other side, the man who said these words to Asher was riding a horse on the beautiful plains of the river bay, enjoying the beautiful sunset. Viserys. The convoy was moving slowly in the distance, and the eldest princess of the empire, Rhaenys Targaryen, saw him standing alone on the hill, and then rode up. Chapter 743 Pregnant again. Viserys rode his horse on the hill, his hands in deerskin gloves crossed on the saddle, looking at the beautiful sunset in the distance. He was wearing an exquisite silver velvet coat, dark tight breeches, and his long silver gold hair was freely draped over his shoulders. He wore a Valyrian steel crown on his head, and in the center of the crown was a ruby that could emit warm magic, like an elegant prince from a myth. Viserys. At this time, a girl's voice came from behind him, followed by the sound of horse hooves and horse bells. Rhaenys rode a snow-white warhorse and rushed up, came to his side, and stood side by side with Viserys. What are you looking at? Rhaenys sat on the horse's back and pulled the reins, then looked in the direction Viserys was looking, and her breathing slightly stopped for a second. Because in front of her was a beautiful scene that made people hold their breath. After crossing the mountain, there is an endless open plain in front of us. The red clouds covered the sky. The afterglow of the setting sun was evenly sprinkled on the land. The neatly distributed fields were full of golden grains, and the hard-working farmers were working tirelessly in the fields. This is a beautiful sunset, and also a scene of a good harvest. Rines, who had just followed the caravan at the foot of the mountain, had never thought that there would be such a beautiful scene on the other side of the mountain. This picture. It's beautiful. Rines opened her mouth slightly, and there were many beautiful words on her lips, but in the end it became the simplest word. Then the girl with long brown hair turned her eyes to Viserys, but found that the other person didn't have much smile on his face. Instead, his face was calm and even a little serious. The red clouds of the setting sun shone on his side face, leaving only a deepness in his eyes, until the silver-haired young man came back to his senses, raised his head slightly, and revealed a pair of beautiful lavender eyes that were breathtaking. Yes, it is indeed beautiful. Viserys nodded slightly, with a fleeting smile on his face. This was the country he built with his own hands, so he naturally liked such beautiful scenery. Then he turned over and dismounted, holding the reins in his hand. And Rines also turned over and dismounted, jumping off the horse's back, holding the reins in her hand. What's wrong? She just saw the seriousness on Viserys' face, as if he was thinking about something. She knew very well that the flash of smile just now was just to comfort her expression. Rines' heart couldn't help but jump slightly, and then asked, Irian is pregnant again. Are you unhappy? Recently, it has been a double, or even triple happiness for the people of King's Landing. The Lord of Tyrosh submitted a document of submission to the Valyrian Empire, and also made it public to the people of Tyrosh, causing an uproar. However, in the case of precedence, Liz and me had already publicly expressed their submission to the new empire, so in fact, the people of Tyrosh had more or less already had some psychological foundation for construction, so they were not so caught off guard. But the riots in Tyrosh and the protests against the hegemony of the empire had no effect on King's Landing. The Lord of Tyrosh had to swallow his broken teeth. If he wanted to secure his position as lord, and not be driven out or killed, he had to suppress the chaos. Lies, me, and Tyrosh, the three free trade cities, submitted letters of surrender one after another, and the kingdom of the three daughters was officially incorporated into the territory of the empire. The kingdom of the three daughters is connected to Pentus and Indolus. Except for Bravos, the west coast of the east continent is almost full of three-headed dragon flags, which are completely infiltrated by the new empire. Therefore, this is naturally a great joyous event. They have upgraded from the people of the Seven Kingdoms to the people of the Valyrian Empire. However, the empire is constantly expanding its territory. When facing foreign merchants, the people of the empire can speak with their heads up, hold their heads high, and even be arrogant. A silk merchant from Bravos and a small noble in King's Landing had a conflict. The noble actually threatened on the street that Bravos was just a small ant under the feet of the empire. Maybe one day Bravos will be swallowed up by the new empire, and by then they will be nothing more than slaves of a fallen country. The enemies of the empire have long lost their foothold in Westeros. After the two conquest wars, the defeated nobles who were deprived of their fiefdoms fled to the east continent and even wanted to organize a counterattack. However, the Iron Throne has not let them go, and is still constantly eroding their living space. They can only keep running away to the east, but death will catch up with them sooner or later. For example, Humphrey Hightower of the Hightower family in Old Town, in order to return to the empire, begged his majesty for forgiveness, and even offered Rhys, and killed all the governors of Rhys. The story has spread throughout the streets and alleys. The conflict between this little noble and the Bravos merchant on the street attracted many onlookers, and his words attracted cheers from the whole hall. The Bravos merchant was grey-faced, opened his mouth and was speechless, and finally left in disgrace. This conflict is enough to show the trust and great vision of the people of King's Landing for the empire. People have great expectations for the future, and the performance of Bravos merchants is also a matter of concern for all Bravos people. The development of the empire is no longer an enemy that the Iron Bank can fight. The new empire is like a mountain hanging over the head for the people of Bravos, especially after the kingdom of the three daughters was included in the territory. This panic has intensified. But these have nothing to do with the people of King's Landing. People just celebrate the continuous expansion of the empire's territory. Its reputation spread far and wide. Its national strength is at its peak, and it is still thriving. After the surrender of the kingdom of the three daughters, another happy event came and soon spread, that is, Queen Irian Nimrus Martel was pregnant again. This news is even more important than the surrender of the kingdom of the three daughters. Because if you ask everyone, now that the empire is thriving and everything has entered the regular state, what is the only hidden danger? I'm afraid it can be believed that everyone will give the same answer, that is, His Majesty the Emperor has no son now. Although according to Dawn's customs, Princess Dina Targaryen is also eligible to inherit the throne of the Valyrian Empire, but there is a problem that is difficult to get around. This is in King's Landing, the center of the entire empire, not in Dawn. Chapter 744 Collective Relocation. Even though Prince Doran is suspected to be under house arrest in King's Landing, he is not able to support his granddaughter to ascend the throne in the future. After all, Viserys is still young, and he will definitely not live longer than Viserys. And His Majesty the Emperor is still young, which may be the only thing to be thankful for in this biggest hidden danger. As long as Viserys is still alive, this vast country will not collapse. But if you imagine that the founding emperor of the Valyrian Empire is now old, and he has not left a prince to succeed him, and there are two sisters who can control dragons, I'm afraid that the entire empire is now in a storm, waiting for Viserys to die suddenly, and then the whole country will fall into an endless civil war, and the great emerging empire will fall. Therefore, the most direct way to solve this worry is for Viserys to leave a prince. After all, there are many difficulties for the princess to succeed to the throne, but everything will seem logical if there is a prince to succeed to the throne, and it will not give those ambitious people any chance. Those who hope that the country will continue to get better will add one more sentence when they pray, hoping that His Majesty will give birth to a prince as soon as possible. Those who are worried about the rise of the Valyrian Empire and even hold a grudge curse day and night, they hope that the gods can punish Viserys so that he will never have a son in his life, and after his death, the empire he built will collapse, and they can take the opportunity to regain their homes and power. However, everyone attaches great importance to the heir to the empire, but Viserys is very open-minded about this. He doesn't care whether he has a son now, and he doesn't, like many kings in history, see that he has no son and cast a wide net to catch more fish, find a bunch of mistresses, and hope that one of them can get pregnant and give birth to a son for him. However, the news that Queen Irian is pregnant again still attracted celebrations in King's Landing. Coupled with the surrender of the kingdom of the third daughter, the territory of the empire continues to expand, and the harvest is full in the summer for many years, and three good things come to the door. However, it was at this time that Viserys suddenly announced at the 500-person court meeting in the throne room that the imperial family was about to leave King's Landing collectively and go to Highgarden, known as the backyard of the royal family, for vacation. Highgarden is a beautiful garden city. Since the Second War of Conquest, Highgarden has been owned by the royal family and has become a backyard for vacation and leisure. His Majesty has always had the tradition of going to Highgarden for vacation. Therefore, many nobles at the court meeting did not doubt it and just regarded it as a routine rule of the royal family. But this time there were so many people going that it attracted some attention. This vacation almost emptied the entire Red Castle, including Queen Irian, who was just pregnant, Princess Rhaenys, Princess Daenerys, Princess Diana Targaryen, etc. In addition to the maids, servants, royal stewards, king's goods, and part of the Unsullied Legion in the Red Castle, a mighty convoy of more than 1,000 people rushed to Highgarden. Anyone can see that the sudden order issued by His Majesty the Emperor is somewhat unusual, but some people did not take it seriously, while others were very cautious. They believe that any action taken by a person like His Majesty the Emperor cannot be without reason, and they hope to find some clues from it to restore his true intentions. Some people even made a bold guess that Viserys thought that the population burden of King's Landing was too heavy, so he decided to move the capital to Highgarden to relieve the pressure of King's Landing as the capital, and the collective relocation of the royal family was just a preliminary plan. His analysis was well reasoned and convincing, but unfortunately Viserys' idea did not decide to move the capital to Highgarden as he guessed, but there were other reasons. However, there are also some smart people among those who try to guess the emperor's intentions. For example, it is said that the governor of the valley, Petty Beelish, transferred a large amount of assets to Pentus across the narrow sea shortly after His Majesty the Emperor announced that the royal family would go to Highgarden for vacation, and another army left King's Landing and rushed to the north. No, of course not for that reason. Viserys, who was holding the reins, heard Rhaenyra's words and tilted his head slightly to look at the brown-haired girl, then shook his head and denied it. His eldest daughter Diana had already passed her second name day. Irian's pregnancy again was a good thing for Viserys personally, the royal family, and even the entire country. Viserys was naturally very happy, but he was worried about another thing. Perhaps it was for this reason that he made up his mind to let the royal family leave the Red Castle and temporarily move to Highgarden. What's the reason? Rhaenys also held the reins and looked at Viserys with a puzzled look. My eyes can see things that ordinary people can't see. However, Viserys did not hide anything from Rhaenys. It can be said that Rhaenys must be among the people he trusts the most. Many people changed their original fate because of Viserys' existence, and among them, the first person whose fate was changed by Viserys was the already graceful girl in front of him. She tilted her head with a cute expression, waiting for Viserys' words. The enemies in the north are stronger. I'm worried that we may not be able to resist the next invasion of the White Walkers. Viserys said bluntly. He could see that the darkness in the north was becoming purer and more terrifying. His own strength was increasing. The 5 young dragons had grown up and had the ability to fight. The White Walkers were also not idle. They didn't know what kind of conspiracy they were accumulating. Even if Viserys had a fragmented prophetic ability, he couldn't see it, because every time he tried to predict, he got nothing but darkness. At this time, Irian was pregnant again, and Viserys' concerns became more. He didn't know what he would face in the future, so he decided to let the royal family move to Highgarden collectively. Is that so? When Rhaenys heard Viserys' words, she was also a little surprised. Now the whole country was thriving and prosperous, and she didn't see the hidden dangers that were coming in the future. She even felt that, if the White Walkers came again, they would definitely not cause the losses of the last invasion. Maybe they would be defeated directly outside the wall. But little did they know that, while humans were making progress, the White Walkers were not lagging behind either, and under the tide of the revival of magic, all the ghosts and monsters in the world were slowly awakening, but humans themselves had long forgotten magic. Chapter 745, False Dawn. Viserys' words shocked Rhaenys. She originally thought that the White Walkers were no longer a hidden danger, but Viserys did not think so. Because he had a pair of eyes close to the gods, he saw a dark future. Although there was nothing there, it was this kind of nothing that was the most frightening. So much so that Viserys could not help but let his wife and children retreat to the back, fearing that something unexpected would happen. How could this happen? Is there anything I can do? After hearing this, Rhaenys could not help but ask. She had always wanted to help Viserys do something, at least to share the burden on his shoulders. Viserys was not actually a few years older than Rhaenys, but because of his 2 lives as a human, his mind was far more mature than Rhaenys. Therefore, when Rhaenys was at the age of playfulness, she often saw Viserys' bedroom lights burning until the middle of the night. At the age of 8, he had to take on his family, responsibilities, and missions alone. He took the initiative to stand in front of the stage where there were hungry wolves. Everyone looked at him with greed and nakedness. Everyone regarded him as the most delicious pastry and wanted to eat him in one bite. However, Viserys dealt with these people like this and eventually led his family and clan to grow up with the mission of revenge. Rhaenys and Daenerys were always protected by him and never felt any danger. Rhaenys wanted to share something with him from then on, and now, the one sweet girl has grown up. She is a dragon rider who can wear armor and ride a dragon to go out to fight, and she can also be independent. The silver-haired young man with the Valyrian steel crown on his head was silent when he heard her words, and Rhaenys looked at his figure close at hand, and then suddenly spoke. Viserys, I will always be by your side no matter what. Viserys was slightly stunned when he heard her words, and then raised his head to see the firm eyes of the brown-haired girl, without any hesitation, and also looked at him with a sharp gaze. Rhaenys rarely dared to look him in the eye before, but now her eyes are full of determination. We are a family. Then the girl let go of the reins and came to Vizori's side, then opened her arms and hugged him gently. It was as if she had practiced it hundreds of times. Vizori's body stiffened slightly, but then relaxed, exhaled gently, and seemed to release some kind of inner confinement. He did not stop Renas from hugging him, and then opened his arms and hugged the girl tightly. His arms were even stronger, as if he wanted the girl to merge into his body, and even Renas couldn't help but whimper. That's right. We are a family. Vizori's hugged Renas and repeated what she had just said in a low voice. The girl was a little hurt by Vizori's arm just now, but then she couldn't help but purse her lips slightly when she heard his words, where he couldn't see, as if she still wanted to maintain her posture, but in the end she pursed her lips and couldn't help but smile. Renas couldn't help but hold Vizori's arms tightly, hugging him tighter. No matter what difficulties we face in the future, we can shoulder them together. I will always be by your side, even if we fight to the last moment. The brown-haired girl looked at Vizori's closely, and Vizori's also looked into her clear eyes. Then Renas closed her eyes, and Vizori's slowly lowered his head and gently kissed her soft lips. The girl's body fragrance penetrated into Vizori's nostrils. He clearly felt Renas's delicate body tremble slightly, and then she hugged him more tightly. The young man and woman embraced each other on the grassland outside the hill, and their war horses also came together, looking at each other with big eyes, and then rubbing their heads against each other. Danny, everyone says that you will marry His Majesty in the end. Really? In the royal convoy at the foot of the mountain in the distance, the soldiers of the Unsullied Legion escorted on both sides. They held spears and round shields in their hands, with serious expressions and meticulousness. On a carriage, covered with gorgeous curtains, Missandei and Daenerys, two good friends who can talk about anything, were talking quietly. Then the girl from Nas Island seemed to have thought of something, opened her big eyes, and asked curiously, "No way. There is no taboo between good friends." Missandei was also a little curious, and said what she wanted to say, but it made the silver-haired girl blush a little. In Westeros, girls of this age are no longer ignorant, and they still retain their innocence. Many girls like Daenerys have married after their first menstruation, and even have children in a few years. How is it possible? They are all nonsense. Daenerys' face was a little red. In fact, she had also heard the old maid in the Red Castle say that her bloodline was purer, with silver hair and purple eyes, and she was more suitable than Her Royal Highness the Princess. And since then, she herself even had some expectations. After all, which girl has not fantasized about the day when she gets married? However, Daenerys' face was still a little red, and she defended herself 3 times. Then she thought of something. The 3 girls had agreed to play a card game, and none of them could be missing, but Renas seemed to have disappeared. Where is Renas? Her face was a little shy and red, so Daenerys found an excuse to slip out of the car. Missandei, you stay in the car for a while, I'll go find her. However, before Missandei could react, Daenerys jumped off the car. Daenerys rode her pony to find Rhaenys' trace, and as a princess of the Targaryen family, she also didn't think that riding a horse would be more difficult than riding a dragon. However, when Daenerys rode her pony to the top of the hill facing the brilliant sunset, she saw the scene not far away, pulled the reins, and was slightly stunned. At the same time, one south and one north, the end of the world. Snow was flying all over the sky, and the ground and the sky were all white. Benjen also learned from Lyanna what the name of this land that was not marked on the map was. This place is connected to the land of eternal winter in Westeros, located in the north of the Shivering Sea, and the end point of all map records is called the White Wasteland. As the name suggests, it is white all year round, without any other colors, desolate and silent, vast, and no one can reach the end. The endless army of the dead was moving forward in silence, and Benjen and Lyanna were mixed in it. Then the ice dragon above their heads roared, shaking the entire ice field, and flapped its wings to fly away. On the other side, on the scorching summer sea, the Imperial fleet, with 3-headed fire dragons and golden sea monster flags erected high, was cutting through the waves, and continuing to move eastward. The fleet's commander-in-chief, Asha Greyjoy, held the Eye of Mir in her hand, and stood on the commanding heights of the ship, looking into the distance. Her breathing was slightly rapid, and her heart could not help but surge. Chapter 746, New Calendar 7th Year. Year 299 of the Egan calendar, year 7 of the new calendar. Time flies, like a white horse passing by. 4 years have passed in the blink of an eye. King's Landing, a great city that has stood on this land for nearly 3 centuries, is still prosperous, even more lively than 4 years ago, and has also changed a lot. A 2-masted warship with a 3-headed dragon flag and a golden sea monster flag of the Greyjoy family pushed away the sea water and slowly sailed towards the port of Blackwater Bay. Because the political and economic status of King's Landing has been repeatedly improved, the power center of the empire was established here, with a high degree of centralization, and the development of King's Landing has also taken a fast train, advancing by leaps and bounds. Therefore, the problem of insufficient operating capacity of the Blackwater Bay port, the largest port in King's Landing, has also been exposed. After several large-scale expansions in recent years, it has finally grown into the most important trade and military port in the entire Westeros continent, and there is no other. The port of Blackwater Bay is prosperous and thriving. There are many ships coming and going from the port, flying various flags from all over the world. They start to line up in long queues from a long distance, waiting to be inspected and checked for entry. On the Sea of Blackwater Bay, there are ships of the capital garrison patrolling to maintain order for ships entering the port. This also made the smuggling and criminal gangs that were once extremely rampant in King's Landing begin to disappear, until most of them disappeared in the end, and the only ones left were some idle or desperate thieves. Because it is said that the chief customs officer of the empire is a very powerful person. He was once a smuggler, so he is very familiar with the loopholes in King's Landing and the routines of smugglers. He is quick, accurate and ruthless, and has become a nightmare for all smugglers. The chief customs officer even suffered retaliation from this group of evil forces and almost lost his life, but it was this behavior that made the top officials of the empire furious and caused the subsequent bloody conflict. The Imperial Council issued a death order to the commander-in-chief of the capital garrison. On a certain day 2 years ago, a thunderous cleanup operation was launched. Just like the cleanup of the Sparrows, all the major evil forces in King's Landing were wiped out in one go. The people applauded, and the security of King's Landing has been directly raised to a higher level since then. Once, I thought we were destined to die in a foreign country. I didn't expect that we would really have a day to return home. On the 2-masted warship flying the imperial emblem and the flag of the Greyjoy family, 2 men stood side by side. They stood on the bow with their feet on the wooden barrel, looking at the bustling metropolis in the afternoon sun in the distance, and the imperial palace towering on Egan's Hill. Because this is where they are going next, to meet the emperor of the empire in the throne room. The 2 people at the bow looked at each other, and they could see the tension and excitement in their eyes, because this was the most important and highlight moment of their lives. King's Landing, we are here. Then one of the men with blonde hair and a scar on his cheek took a deep breath. Next to him stood a companion with dark hair and a dark eye patch, who looked like a pirate. I remember that I could smell the disgusting smell even from a long distance from King's Landing. The man with blonde hair and a scar on his cheek took a deep breath and asked with some doubt, "Jack, have you been to King's Landing before?" On the other side, the companion with one blind eye and an eye patch heard his words and turned around to ask, "Well, I came here with my father when I was young. I came here to do business." The blonde man, called Jack by his companion, did not hide it, nodded and said, "That's great. I've never been to King's Landing." The companion with an eye patch and a somewhat cruel face shook his head, his voice a little envious. "He is a bastard of the Iron Islands, and bastards have a low social status, no matter where they are. Although he has a father who is a noble, this father is the same as not having one. He has lived an orphan-like life and depended on his mother since he was a child. Until his mother died of illness, he became a lonely man. And his father finally did a good thing that can be called a father, that is, before the fall of the Iron Islands, he gave him a boat and let his own son escape by boat." The 2 people who are talking on the boat now are one of the many pirates who were attacked by the Imperial fleet in the port of Nass Island many years ago. That naval battle was extremely tragic. It was a one-sided massacre, but most of the pirates were buried in the sea or fled to the island and were infected with butterfly fever. but some of them were captured alive and became prisoners. One-Eye, Romy, Pike and Jack, who were captains of the Skeleton Brotherhood at the time, were among them, but the two seemed very bachelors in the face of the Imperial fleet, and they directly knelt down and surrendered without any resistance. And their special identities are from Westeros, and One-Eye, Romy, Pike is a bastard of the Iron Islands. When fellow villagers meet, their eyes are filled with tears. Therefore, the two knelt on one knee and swore allegiance, successfully won the trust of Asher Greyjoy, washed away their pirate identities, and became a member of the Imperial fleet. And the two brothers also played a crucial role in the several major battles that broke out between the Imperial fleet and the pirates of the Basilisk Islands. Now, One-Eyed Romy, Pike and Blonde Jack were sent by Asher Greyjoy to King's Landing to meet the Emperor of the Empire. They carried the special mission given to them by Asher, and more importantly, they were personally escorting something more mysterious. Therefore, they were able to fulfill their dreams and return to their hometown. And this two-masted warship, which was covered with scars on its body and seemed to have gone through countless hardships, soon attracted the attention of the patrolling capital garrison. And this two-masted warship also flew the Imperial flag and the Greyjoy family's golden sea monster flag. Therefore, soon the news was passed from the patrol soldiers to the captain, the harbor master of the Blackwater Bayport, and finally to the Onion Knight Davos Seaworth, the chief of the Imperial Customs. What? The Onion Knight frowned slightly when he heard the news. Because according to the management regulations of King's Landing Port, warships flying the Imperial flag and the Noble flag can enter the port directly through special channels without queuing. All merchant ships need to make room for the Imperial warships. This port management regulation has been implemented for several years, and it is impossible that there are still ships coming and going who don't know this. Therefore, Davos instinctively felt that there was something wrong here, and then stood up and said, "Take me to sea." Chapter 747 Suspicion. Soon, not too long after, a small boat flying the flag of the Capital Guard sailed towards the scarred and dusty two-masted warship. The two sides exchanged a few words. Because the small boat had the flag of the Capital Guard, the soldiers on the warship did not dare to neglect it either, and quickly lowered the ladder to let everyone on the small boat board the ship. Davos Seaworth, the chief customs officer of the Empire, was dressed in casual clothes, not strong, and even a little ugly. He had a long sword hanging on his waist, brown hair and brown eyes, but his hair was mixed with some grey. The first knuckles of the other four fingers on his left hand, except the thumb, were cut off and hung around his neck as a talisman to remind himself at all times. He led several soldiers of the Capital Guard to board the warship from the small boat, and on the other side, One-Eye Romy Pike, the captain and deputy captain of the two-masted warship Storm Fury, and Jack also rushed over. "Hello, sir." The two brothers looked at each other. As the commander, One-Eyed Romy was born in a humble family and didn't know how to talk to the nobles. As a brother of a different surname, Jack quickly glanced at the emblem on Davos' chest. It seemed that there was a small black ship printed on a grey background, and there was an onion pattern on the sail of the small black ship. Jack was slightly stunned. Although he was not a direct descendant of the Lannister family, but an insignificant collateral child, his father had also taught him to learn to read and recognize the emblems and family languages of some major nobles in the Seven Kingdoms since he was a child. But Jack had never seen this black ship plus onion pattern before, and he was even a little confused. Which noble family was this? The designed emblem was so sloppy that Jack felt that his 2-year-old daughter's doodles were more meaningful than the family emblem of this lord. Fortunately, Jack, an outsider, obviously did not recognize Lord Davos, but a soldier of the capital garrison opposite him with a 7-pointed star shoulder badge on his shoulder was very perceptive and reminded him appropriately. "This is the head of the Empire's customs, Lord Davos of the Seaworth family of Cape Wrath." "What? It's Lord Seaworth. I've heard of your name for a long time." Jack, who was reminded on the other side, suddenly realized and quickly stretched out his hand to shake hands with Davos Seaworth. His one-eyed brother with a black eye patch was a little confused. He turned his head and looked at Jack, wondering if he had ever heard of Lord Seaworth in his life. But Jack was born in a business family in Lannisport after all, while Romy was just an illegitimate child of the Iron Islands. Jack was better at dealing with outsiders and although there was an arrow wound on his cheek from a previous naval battle, it did not look hideous. Instead, it added a heroic touch to his handsome face, unlike the one-eyed dragon next to him, who did not look like a good person. "I'm Davos Seaworth. Welcome, friends, to King's Landing." The Imperial Customs Chief spoke at this time, shaking hands with Jack, who was obviously the person in charge of the ship, and looking at the soldier who had just spoken with praise. "This is indeed a talented person, smart and sensible. Maybe there is a chance to ask Lord Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, to take it over as his own guard." Davos thought about this in his mind, but his eyes were like torches. After retracting his hand, he swept over the people in the cabin, especially focusing on the one-eyed Romy Pike. The warship was covered with scars, obviously having experienced several storms and fierce naval battles. Although the soldiers on the deck were wearing old-fashioned Imperial armor, they were obviously murderous, like people who had just retired from the battlefield. However, in the past 2 years, the Empire has been calm, and no war has broken out against foreign countries, let alone naval battles. Who are they? The Onion Knight narrowed his eyes slightly, and on the surface he remained calm, but his suspicion in his heart became heavier. He had suspected that there was something wrong with the ship and the people on board, and he found more suspicious points after boarding the ship. This friend's outfit is indeed, haha. Then, Davos' eyes fell on the one-eyed Romy who had not spoken, and then he spoke in a teasing tone. It seemed like he was joking, but his eyes were fixed on the other person, as if he wanted to see through his true identity. This is our Captain Romy Pike. He is also a member of the Imperial Fleet." Jack, who was standing aside, heard the words of the Imperial Customs Director, turned his head, and looked at his companion, and immediately spoke with some embarrassment. Because Romy Pike's dress and style were indeed a little too obvious, and he looked no different from a pirate. He wore a black eye mask, his clothes were unbuttoned, and his chest was exposed. He wore rough linen shoes on his feet, and a scimitar was tied around his waist. His cheeks were untidy and his face was full of cruelty. He was a pirate. The topic suddenly turned to himself. One-eyed Romy was still a little confused. He looked down at his outfit. He didn't think there was anything wrong with his outfit. Don't all lion races dress like this? Oh. Are you also a fleet of the Empire? But I see you are flying the flag of the Greyjoy family of the Iron Islands. Are you the subordinates of Governor Euron? After a simple verbal test, the topic finally turned to the key issue, and the real purpose was about to be revealed. The Onion Knight's eyes narrowed slightly, and he asked calmly, but he secretly made a gesture behind his back. Several soldiers of the capital garrison behind him had already heard the problem, and all of them quietly put their hands on the hilts of their swords, as if they were facing a great enemy. Governor Euron Greyjoy. What is a governor? However, after hearing the words of the Onion Knight, the one-eyed man dressed like a pirate finally spoke. He had fled overseas when the White Walkers invaded, and he didn't know about the new changes in the Empire, so he didn't understand the governor and the new noble system. "We are indeed a ship of the Greyjoy family, but we are not Euron's men," One-Eyed Romy Pike said bluntly. "We are under the command of Lord Asher Greyjoy, and come from the Summer Isles." Asher Greyjoy? From the Summer Isles? The Onion Knight was slightly stunned when he heard the other party's words. Chapter 748 A Distant Story. You have been gone for too long. Many people even thought you were dead. The two-masted warship Storm Fury from the Summer Islands docked at the port of Blackwater Bay in King's Landing, and was loading and unloading cargo. They came to King's Landing to report on behalf of Asher Greyjoy and to escort a special thing. This matter cannot be missed. Asher must choose someone who is trustworthy and reliable to do it. One-Eyed Romy Pike was nervously directing the soldiers to unload the big box from the cabin. Everyone was very careful and then loaded it onto a special large carriage. On the other side, Davos Seaworth, the chief customs officer of the Empire, was chatting with the first mate Blonde Jack. What he said represented the thoughts of most people, because the thick fog of the sea of smoke continued to spread, cutting off the communication between the east and the west. They could not receive any news about Asher Greyjoy. Everyone thought they were dead, but they didn't expect that another ship would return after such a long time. Davos had sent someone to inform the throne room in advance that today was the emperor's hearing day, and he would listen to the petitions of nobles across the country in the throne room of the Hall of 500. Nobles who had any opinions or suggestions that needed to be made public could come to King's Landing and submit an application to attend the court meeting and then put it forward in public. Ordinary people and merchants could also do so. The Imperial Council was generally held once a week, while the hearing day meeting was held half a month and sometimes once a month. It was not a coincidence that Romy and Jack came today. Now that the Emperor was listening to suggestions in the throne room, they needed to submit an application and get approval before they could meet the Emperor. However, not long after, a reply came from the Red Castle, allowing Romy and Jack from the Summer Islands to meet the Emperor. And Tyrion Lannister, the Emperor's personal advisor, would personally greet them at the gate of the Red Castle. If they wanted to say anything in the throne room, they should tell Tyrion in advance, and he would decide what could be made public and what could not be made public, and explain the etiquette of meeting the Emperor of the Empire. Goodbye, Lord Davos. Go. Davos said goodbye to the captain and first mate of the Stormbridge from the Summer Islands. He was also curious and wanted to know what happened at the end of the world thousands of miles away. Unfortunately, he had official business today. The severed finger hanging around Davos' neck was indeed his amulet, allowing him to quickly find his position every time his mind was floating and his faith began to waver. Davos continued to be busy with his work, while on the other side, soldiers wearing old-style Imperial Navy armor escorted the huge wooden box through the bustling streets of King's Landing, attracting many onlookers from the capital. Because they hadn't seen such murderous soldiers for a long time, and there were some strange noises coming from the big box they escorted from time to time, which aroused people's curiosity. Many of these soldiers who went on the expedition to Nass Island originally set out from King's Landing. They haven't returned to their hometown for many years, but they were full of strangeness and joy. The strangeness was that there had been earth-shaking changes, and the joy was that everything in front of them was thriving. However, when they turned the corner, a huge shadow loomed over their heads. The soldiers escorting the wooden box, including one-eyed Romy and Jack, were all startled and couldn't help but draw their swords. But when they saw it clearly, they realized that it was a huge golden statue standing tall in the municipal square in the center of King's Landing. What a big dragon. This was a ferocious dragon, its claws pressed on the stone platform, and its half-opened wings could almost touch the building called Imperial Bank in the distance. It raised its huge dragon head, with ferocious eyes, and seemed to be howling to the sky. On the back of the dragon sat a handsome young human who was drawing his sword and pointing it directly to the northern sky. This is the great emperor and his partner Balerion who fought alongside him. Seeing this team, he was startled and even drew his sword. A passing merchant with gorgeous clothes, two straight beards and a plump figure spoke arrogantly. Country bumpkin. There was also a beautiful woman with heavy makeup and a sweet smile beside him holding his arm. Then the two of them walked past the pirate captain leisurely and went to the Imperial Bank across the square to withdraw money to buy some luxury goods for the beauty beside them. The construction there was magnificent and gorgeous, and people came and went in an endless stream. Regardless of whether they were poor or rich, the ship workers loading and unloading goods at the port walked into it side by side with the wealthy merchants. Fuck. I'm going to kill him. It was not until the two people walked away that the pirate captain One-Eye Romy reacted and felt that his nose was about to be crooked because he was actually scolded by someone pointing at his nose. However, Jack hurriedly grabbed his brave but foolish partner. He hadn't been to King's Landing for many years. The last time he came was when he was a child and followed his father. He had clearly felt that the city was different from 20 years ago. Not only was the construction brand new, the air no longer had the stench of the past, but the spirit of the people had also changed. He heard the tone of pride in the city from the man, dressed as a wealthy businessman. That was why he reminded them that this was the statue of the Emperor of the Empire in front of them. Are they proud of this country and this city? 20 years. Can so much change happen? Jack murmured softly, then he glanced at the young figure on the giant statue, and then cast his eyes to the red castle in the distance. He was increasingly looking forward to meeting the man who was said to have created this empire, and even made Lord Asher Greyjoy at, or to her tone every time she mentioned him. Let's go. 4 or 5 years ago, Asher Greyjoy led 2,000 Imperial soldiers and a fleet to spend more than half a year on an expedition to the distant island of Nas to protect the vassal states that surrendered to the Empire. However, after defeating some pirates and slave hunters on Nas Island, Asher finally faced a choice whether to retreat to the Summer Islands or to pursue the victory and continue to catch the Basilisk Islands off guard. In the end, the daughter of the sea monster did not retreat on the sea and chose the risky path. She led the fleet to attack the Basilisk Islands. But this war was lost. The pirates of the Basilisk Islands had received intelligence and set up an ambush in advance. The Imperial fleet suffered heavy losses and fled back to the Summer Islands. The islanders of Nas Island even suffered retaliatory attacks and massacres by the pirates. On the other hand, the pirates did not give up. After repelling the Imperial fleet, they were greedy for the fleet's ships, equipment, wealth, and the reputation they could get by defeating them. Therefore, they united with the Red Flower Valley tribe not far from the Imperial fleet camp. The old chief of the Red Flower Valley tribe has died, and his son has become the new chief. However, the new chief is treacherous and covets the beauty of Asher Greyjoy, so he agrees with the pirates to attack Lizardhead together. He only needs to get a part of the spoils, including Asher herself. The throne room was crowded and whispered. They were shocked by the story at the end of the world. What's next? However, when people heard this, they couldn't help but hold their breath. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 749, Queen of the Summer Islands. What's next? Actually, Lord Asher Greyjoy had already discovered the betrayal of the Red Flower Valley tribe, so she contacted the Sweet Lotus Valley tribe in advance. Lord Asher led us to launch a surprise attack late at night, catching the enemy off guard. We attacked from both sides and wiped out the Red Flower Valley tribe first, and then turned around to deal with the pirates. In the throne room of the Red Castle, most of the upper echelons of the Empire, as well as some wealthy businessmen and civilian representatives, gathered here. The bastard of the Iron Islands with a black eye patch stood here with a proud look. This is certainly something he should be proud of. It goes without saying how dangerous this war that broke out on Zell Island in the Summer Islands was. In the dim night, both sides had already killed each other with bloodshot eyes, and this was also a typical case of a GD counterattack and defeating the enemy with fewer troops. Lord Asher Greyjoy also killed the self-proclaimed Pirate King Herald in a one-on-one fight on the ship. Because they had received intelligence in advance that the Imperial fleet was preparing to attack the Basilisk Islands, the Brotherhood of Bones, which was based on the Fly Island, led the pirates to set up an ambush in advance to resist the encirclement of the Imperial fleet. The Brotherhood of Bones became the leader of many pirates, and the leader of the Brotherhood of Bones, Jack, and the former elder brother of One-Eyed Romy, the Fierce Herald, became the leader of all pirates in the entire Basilisk Islands. He even proclaimed himself the Pirate King after successfully defeating the attack of the Imperial fleet. The title and tradition of Pirate King did not actually originate from Herald, but was a self-proclaimed title by the pirates, who had eliminated the indigenous people of the Basilisk Islands since the Dawn era. It refers to the pirate leader who unified the Basilisk Islands, and can be honored as the Pirate King. And this self-proclaimed Pirate King Herald fought one-on-one with Asher Greyjoy, the commander of the Imperial fleet, in the boarding battle of the Lizardhead naval battle. The ferocious Herald relied on his tall and strong body to gain the upper hand, but he didn't expect that at the last moment. Because Asher was a woman, he underestimated the enemy and was caught by the daughter of the sea monster. Asher Greyjoy sat on the ground and suddenly stood up and stabbed the Pirate King Herald's chest with a dagger. Then he fell from the deck into the rolling sea with his body and was not found by other crew members until the next day. However, Asher Greyjoy's one-on-one duel killed the Pirate King Herald, which played a crucial role in this great war. The death of the leader made the pirates, who had not undergone any training and were not united, scatter in an instant, and they all drove their boats to escape. The Imperial fleet defeated the pirates in the Lizardhead GD counterattack, but it also lost the ability to pursue the victory. The Sweet Lotus Valley tribe, as a reinforcement, had a big appetite and seemed to want to win all. Then a conflict broke out between the Imperial Army and the Sweet Lotus Valley tribe, but the tribal soldiers, who had no armor, but only feathers and grass skirts, naturally had no way to fight against the fully armed Imperial soldiers. Although the Imperial soldiers were exhausted, the war was one-sided from the beginning, and they only relied on golden heartwood longbows and spears to fight back. Then a cold arrow took away the chief of the Sweet Lotus Valley tribe, and the war was over. All the tribal warriors knelt down and surrendered in panic. Asher Greyjoy dramatically captured the Sweet Lotus Valley tribe and the Red Flower Valley tribe in one breath, conquered the largest island of Zale in the Summer Islands, and had thousands of tribal warriors. However, as an alien invader, Asher Greyjoy occupied Zale Island, which naturally aroused the vigilance of the other two main island tribes in the Summer Islands. They rarely put aside their differences and united to demand that Asher must withdraw from the rule of Zale Island and hand over the freshwater resources of Sweet Lotus Valley and Red Flower Valley. As the largest island in the Summer Islands, Zale Island is not the most populous and prosperous. The prosperity of Zale Island exceeds that of Abenlo Island in the middle, but it is far inferior to that of Virano Island, the capital of the Summer Islands. The fundamental reason for this phenomenon is that, although Zale Island is vast, its freshwater resources are extremely scarce. The two largest freshwater resources are Sweet Lotus Valley and Red Flower Valley. Therefore, controlling these two freshwater resources can successfully rule Zale Island. The tribal alliance of the Summer Islands asked Asher to hand over the freshwater resources of these two valleys. Of course, this is not to return them to the Sweet Lotus Valley tribe and Red Flower Valley tribe that have already surrendered to the sea monster daughter. If they had such a mind, understood what unity and rule meant, they would not have been ununited until now. For the Summer Islands, because they are far away from all continents and floating alone on the summer sea, the historical process has not been interfered by any powerful civilization, and they are still in the stage of primitive tribal civilization and survival of the fittest. They all threatened and demanded greedily, wanting to take control of the ruling power of Zale Island in their own hands. So Asher, who was watching from the sidelines, found another opportunity. As the daughter of Balon Greyjoy, who has always believed in the ancient ways and is committed to restoring the ancient ways, although Asher is different from her father, she is also not a soft-hearted person. Later, the soldiers under Asher's command really found traces of a large gold mine on the Golden Head Peninsula, which made her even more unable to give up the rule here. Then the war broke out, and the two sides launched several fierce battles. Asher Greyjoy led thousands of tribal warriors and imperial soldiers from Zale Island to successfully fight into the Lotus Harbor of Virano Island a year ago, completely ending the last rule of the local tribes of the Summer Islands. She also became the veritable queen of the Summer Islands, controlling the surrounding archipelagos including Kagoshima, Torikoshima, etc., unified the entire Summer Islands with force, disbanded all the tribes, and had more than 10,000 tribal warriors under her command, and the capital was still set in Lotus Harbor. Romy Pike, the one-eye who was born as a pirate, stood at the bottom of the throne room and talked eloquently, telling the legendary story of the expedition of Asher Greyjoy, the female commander of the empire. The many nobles, wealthy businessmen and civilians in the throne room looked at each other, saw the shock in each other's eyes, and couldn't help whispering. They were shocked by the vastness of this world, and there were so many brilliant civilizations at the end of the world. They were even more shocked that the 2,000-man Imperial fleet set out from King's Landing. They still remembered the scene vividly. Later, there were rumors that these people had died, but they didn't expect that this group of people had conquered a country at the end of the world. However, everyone in the throne room couldn't help but feel emotional in their hearts. After all, legendary stories always make people excited and involved. Who doesn't want to be the next conqueror Egan? Many nobles in the Seven Kingdoms have begun to think about whether they should organize a fleet to sail. Chapter 2. Wait a minute. Chapter 750, Vassal Principality. So many years have passed. The ancient old city has undergone earth-shaking changes. The city walls have been extended outward to expand the city's scale. Magnificent wonders have sprung up. The children who once played night games have grown up into heroic teenagers. Your Majesty, A blue-eyed reddish-brown-haired boy with a sturdy figure, his face serious and meticulous, knocked on the door first, then opened the door and said, "The person has been brought." The reddish-brown-haired boy's Viserys is Squire Robb Stark. In a blink of an eye, he has been with Viserys for several years. Now he is 16 years old and has grown up. Perhaps it won't be long before he will leave King's Landing and return to his hometown to succeed the position of the Governor of the North. Of course, this is what Robb has always expected. Now the Governor of the North is still in the custody of Lord Rickard Karstark, although his mother Lady Catelyn told him that Lord Rickard is trustworthy, and Rickard Karstark also writes to Robb regularly to report to him on the situation in the North. But Robb still felt that power should be in his own hands, and he didn't like Rickard Karstark calling him young master in the letter and coaxing him like a child between the lines. "I'm not a child. I'm a grown man." Therefore, every time Robb received a letter from the North, he would roar loudly in his heart. But now his mother, Lady Catelyn, has returned to Winterfell with her brothers and sisters, and Robb has no one to talk to. He can't tell these to his sister Sansa, who is a queen's maid, so he can only hold these resentments in his heart. After so many years, everyone and everything are changing, and Viserys will naturally not change. He sat on the chair with his back to the desk, stroking his fingers gently, as if he was looking at the sea in the distance, but in fact he was closing his eyes to rest, because he could see the sea view outside without his eyes. In a few years, Viserys' appearance has not changed much. If you insist on saying that there are many unshaved stubble marks on his chin and lips. However, compared to the boy who was standing aside and deliberately growing a beard to pretend to be mature, the change in Viserys' aura was more dramatic. He didn't need a beard as a symbol of a man's maturity and majesty. He just sat there without speaking, or a movement of his fingers, and the slight change of his eyes could make people feel uneasy. And now the person brought by Robb Stark was the captain of the Storm Ridge, Asher's trusted right-hand man, One-Eye Romy Pike, who talked eloquently in the throne room yesterday. He had an important mission, which could not be told in the throne room hearing day with 500 people. Tyrion Lannister, the personal advisor of His Majesty, told them yesterday. Tyrion would convey this matter on his behalf, so Viserys called him here alone today. "Your Majesty." Although he had met His Majesty the Emperor of the Empire in the throne room yesterday, today's private meeting still made the bastard of the Iron Islands with a black eye patch feel nervous. After all, with his background, if it weren't for chance, he would never have been able to set foot in the throne room in his life, let alone meet the Emperor of the Empire in the palace alone. "Your Majesty, this is what Lady Asher Greyjoy asked me to bring." Then Romy Pike took out a letter from his arms, which was stamped with the seal of the Greyjoy family, and handed it to Robb Stark, who was a servant. Robb took the letter in his hand and briefly checked that it should not be poisoned, and then handed it respectfully to Viserys. Viserys took the letter, and with a light stroke of his fingers, he cut the envelope accurately like a knife, and then pulled out the letter from it. Everything that Asher Greyjoy wanted to say was on it. After reading the whole letter, Viserys' eyes flickered slightly, and he didn't say anything for a long time. On the other side, Robb Stark glanced at the bastard of the Iron Islands beside him. As for the one-eyed captain, he was at a loss, because he didn't know what was written in the letter. "Asher Greyjoy, you have made great contributions to the expedition and the development. You will be named the Grand Duke of the Summer Islands, and you will inherit the title from generation to generation and benefit your descendants." Viserys sat behind the desk and read the letter for a long time without speaking. Then he spoke. As soon as he spoke, he conferred on Asher Greyjoy the highest level of title that had never been conferred since the establishment of the Empire, even higher than the Duke of Summerhall conferred by Rhaenys and the Duke of Dragonstone conferred by Daenerys. Because Asher had made great contributions to the expedition, Viserys had promised her a high position before she set out, and she could choose any castle in the Seven Kingdoms after she returned. She also always wanted to fulfill her dream of being conferred a title as a woman and being called Lord. However, Asher's expedition this time was by accident or by chance, and she opened up a vast land, directly conquered the entire Summer Islands, and became the unique queen of the Summer Islands. And Viserys would naturally not be so greedy and shameless to fight with his subordinates for land. What's more, the Summer Islands were not a land that the Iron Throne had the right to claim, and even the Valyrian freehold had not conquered and ruled this land, although the distance was not too far. Perhaps because the land was barren at that time, the Dragon Kings of Valyria did not look down on it. Therefore, this was Asha's own pioneering work, and it should be regarded as her own land. The letter written by Asha was ostensibly to report the results of the war to the Emperor of the Empire, but in fact, the words were full of praise me quickly. So Viserys was not stingy, and he directly gave Asha Greyjoy the title of a female duchess, enjoying the inheritance of generations, a real country, and included the Principality of the Summer Islands in the scope of the Empire's vassalage. In theory, from now on, the Principality of the Summer Islands needs to pay tribute to the Empire, and the Empire also needs to provide protection to its vassal states. However, due to the distance between the two sides, it is likely to be just a formal relationship. However, as an ale or outpost of the Empire, the Principality of the Summer Islands has been firmly rooted in the Summer Sea, and no one can easily remove it. And it has also brought the influence of the Empire along the sea to more distant places, such as Slavers Bay, Sithorias Continent, Karth, and even countries and regions around the Jade Sea, Great Morak Island, Thunder Road, Golden Heavenly Kingdom, etc. The goal that Viserys wanted at the beginning has actually been achieved or even exceeded, so naturally he will not be stingy. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.